Welcome to the Fire from Two Windows podcast, where we hope to take some deep dives and engage in interesting discussions pertaining to the fire service, its training, tactics, and leadership. We will also be canvassing a broad spectrum of firefighters about their lives, fire service careers, and lessons learned. Your hosts, Lou, and myself, Matt, are always looking to improve our trade and pass along valuable knowledge. Thank you for joining us tonight. Good evening, Lou.
What's up, Matt? How are you tonight?
Not bad.
So,
Tonight you wanted to talk about training props.
yeah,
And I know this has come up quite a few times in the last few weeks with the academy. Some of the guys here. Now that summer's kind of rolling in, everybody's a little bit busier than they usually are in the winter. So where do you want to kick us off?
well, first, we probably should put the canned statement out there that our opinions are our own opinions. They don't reflect our employers in any way, and this is just something we're doing for fun and just shooting the breeze and talking about stuff we want to talk about. So, training props. So, they're great for sets and reps. They're great for getting basic maneuvers down. But we talked about last podcast was what happens when they deviate from basics and just try to defeat the prop. We talked about with the roof props. They use OSB and they get used to cutting and working with OSB, and that's not what we're running into on these roofs. I think you've witnessed this happen, and I think we started talking the other night sitting out on the front patio at the firehouse, and we probably should have hit record that night when we were talking about it.
Yeah, that
Especially,
actually went really well.
yeah, but with the traffic noise and everything else, I don't know what the quality would have been like. I mean, this probably isn't the most high quality podcast there is out there, but we do what we do. But
Hey, we're trying.
we're trying. But
We're
with
trying.
my experience in the fire academy, and you've been stepping up a lot in the fire academy. We've seen we're 4 years in and running 2 academies a year, and what's that, 20, figured roughly 25 an academy, so 50 a year for 4 years. That's 200 firemen or
Ish, yeah,
yeah.
give or take. With the average being like 22, somewhere in that ballpark. We did have a large group come through the academy. For those of you listening, we will get into where we work and what we do, our whole background in special podcasts where we interview each other, and we'll really delve into that deep. But just a quick down and dirty version. I'm a fireman. Lou's a captain. We both teach all over the place for the state that we live in, for the department that we work, and also the county. Yeah, actually 2 different counties. So we run into a bunch of different people, bunch of different departments, and a lot of trial and error has gone into these different training props. And we'd like to bring what we've seen out there to you, and also hear back from you guys later on, hopefully through commentary and FAQs, things of that nature. See what else we don't know.
Yeah, so I think a good, not that we're good with segues, but we talked about roof props last week because we talked about vertical ventilation. So I think that'd be a good launch point for us, is just to start with roof props. So what's your take on them? I mean, I got some feelings about roof props.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head on the last podcast. We stated we don't have vacants anymore. Cities, larger cities kind of always have vacants at their disposal, and it leaves county departments, smaller agencies, volunteer organizations not out in the dust. It's just that we got to get a little bit more creative in those realms. And some of the things that have kind of been developed are very interesting, but then comes the safety aspect and repetition on these devices or these props that come out there kind of starts to lean into what you were just kind of alluding to, which is, hey, we're just defeating the prop to get our couple hours in or get our drill done and move on. And it's really not teaching us much other than we're getting used to defeating that thin piece of OSB.
Yeah, I mean, you see a vast array of props out there. I've seen props built with just leaning, a piece of, they take pallets, they screw some OSB onto it or whatever kind of sheathing they got, and then they use like Rescue 42 jacks to set the pitch. Uh, you go all the way to the prop that they have at the county at the county facility where we work, which is probably $1 million roof prop that they built. And then you got the one in our home department that we built, which I think it's a pretty decent roof prop. You're able to ladder it. It's a real height. The roof is a true height of a 2-story colonial. The same with the one at the county. What I do like what the county has, they have like that doghouse type of thing to get, I say kids, but young firemen confidence of being up on a roof where it's only, what do you think that is, like 8 feet in the air, maybe?
It's like half of a shed. Yeah, it's literally the top. So it's the roof of the shed, and then maybe an extra 3 foot, walls underneath of it. So it's a shortened. It's literally just a cut down, whacked at the knees shed.
That little doghouse they got. Yep. Yeah, it's almost like Snoopy's doghouse that they got, where they put rafters on top of the roof of the doghouse. Yeah, it's like I think a 16 reaches from the ground level all the way to the peak, so they don't even have to put a regular ladder up to it. But yeah. I mean, that's good for it. These props are good for gaining confidence up on the roof and doing their cuts. But you were hitting out the other day where you were showing. We talked about West Coast apartment, or I should say a Midwest apartment, where they push the saws because of their masonry background. And we were up cutting the other day for training on the in-service training, and one of the engine captain came out and says, "Hey, why don't you show them how to push the saw?" I said, "Yeah, this works well on OSB because it's not going to bounce and hit anything." I go, "But and it worked, but I'd still like to try it on 3 layers of shingles, tar paper, and whatever else is on these roofs that we these older houses that we have that are." Code in New York State is 3 layers of shingles, but how many houses do we come across where they don't have 3 layers of shingles? They're 4 or 5.
At least a single or 2. I think nowadays most people are tearing them off, but we do still run into a layer after layer with one piece of what am I thinking, stone there. That's sitting in between.
The last vacant we had. We cut a piece of the roof out because it was so built up, and it was turn of the century build. It was like one of the original homesteads in the town that we work in, and they tore it down. I don't even know how they were allowed to do it. But I don't know if you remember, it was skipboarding with like 3/4 inch tongue and groove sheathing, and then on top of that was a layer of 1/2 inch actual plywood, and then there was the shingles on top of it.
Yeah, imagine running out of gas with the saw. You're definitely gonna run out of gas with that axe, like you were saying.
Well, and what we found out on that roof, you would never know that on a roof prop, was that we brought out 2 saws. Both were K9 70 Husqvarna saws. One had a 1212 chopper blade from Firehooks Unlimited, and those are like $80 blades, maybe. I could look it up. I think they're less than 100. And then one had a $300 Warhog blade on it. And now that 1212 chopper blade's got maybe less than a 1/4 inch kerf on it, where that Warhog blade was substantially bigger. I don't know the measurements because we don't buy them here. But because the kerf was, they both had 12 carbide tips on them, but because that kerf was so much wider on that Warhog blade, it was actually bogging down the saw, and we were smoking belts on that roof because it was trying to punch out too much material. Where our 1212 chopper blade, the kerf is a lot thinner. It was like a knife going through the material. And I don't think you take that Warhog blade up on an OSB roof, it's going to cut. Anything is going to cut. You can put your foot through OSB if you try hard enough. But I don't think when the captain that brought his saw, he brought it from his volley company to let us try it. he was stunned. He's like, this is a $200 $300 blade, and we're smoking a belt on our K970, and you have a less than $100 blade, and it's going right through it.
Yeah.
And,
Easily replaceable, and then it goes into the training pile.
right. Yeah, exactly. But with the OSB, we talked about it last time, is on these props, you have a target. On a real roof, you need to know where to cut. The other thing is on these roof props, and I don't think we do a good job with it. Maybe it's something we could design even in our own prop, is putting all the features of the roofs on top of what you're going to encounter. The plumbing stacks, box vents, ridge vents, anything else that's up on the roof, these obstacles that we got to deal with. When we go up on the roof, especially on the prop that we have in our district, what's nice is you get up there and you have an elevated view of that street that's to the west, and you can see, you can pick out all the features on the roofs on those on actual houses. And the one thing I like to point out to the guys is, use the features of the roof to allow you to know where the cut is. A good roofer isn't going to punch a hole through the roof joists, through the rafters, to put their box vents in. Those box vents are going to go in the bays in between the two rafters. So if you see a box vent, your cut should be pretty much right in the middle where those box vents are. Or if you have a ridge vent, you see these videos, or guys telling you, oh, just peel up the ridge vent. That's a whole nother issue of training. Is you can talk about stuff that you can do on the fireground, and then when you really come around to do it, and you are lucky enough to have a vacant or some sort of training structure where they have these features that you can train on, try to peel up a ridge vent. They're not that easy. You got to, even if you get a 6-foot hook underneath there and use that lever and try to pry up as hard as you can, those roofing nails, if they're put in right, they're not popping out that easy. Especially the softer style ones, the aluminum style ones, you might be able to pop out a little bit easy, but the ones that have those almost like a sponge material over.
Yeah, it's like my parents always call it a scrunchie. That's not it. It's a Scotch-Brite, Scotch-Brite. Almost looks like that. That's dropped down in there. It's just a filter for that vent.
Yeah, it just allows,
so instead of box vents,
right. It just doesn't. It allows the critters and stuff not to get inside into the ventilation, and then they cover it with the shingles. But if you try to pry those up, the roofers are putting however many nails in there, and roofing nails. Once you start popping them, it's not that easy. They bend and everything else. But what's nice, if you can get those ridge vents off, it gives you a picture of where those rafters are now, and it potentially eliminates. We talked about our peak cut that we do. It eliminates that last cut because the sheathing doesn't go all the way up for the ventilation. The ventilation's got to come out of the top. So if you just rip your cuts all the way up to the top of the sheathing, to the top of the ridge vent, you essentially have your last cut made because of the ridge vent. And that's something you can't train on our props.
No, not at all. And going back to that Snoopy, the little Snoopy prop that we have over at the county facility. So they have 3 of them in a row. The first one is the Snoopy one, and all they do is they rip sheets of plywood down. And it's actually 8 foot deep. So from one end of the ridge to the other is 8 foot. And it's enough that you can fit 2 4x4s right next to each other. Butts right up to the peak on down. So it kind of sits in a groove, and then you just zip screw them in. That's how that prop operates. You get up there, you cut, you zip it, put a new piece in. So you can have, say 4 rounds, or 4 people go up. Hey, person 1 gets a 4x4, person 2 gets a 4x4. Okay, the other side, and so on and so forth. It's nice for the super basic things. The process of starting the saw on the roof or on a ladder, making your maneuvers, right? It's all just the mechanics of cutting. It's not giving you the visual, like, hey, all roofs are going to look like this. It doesn't give you that at all. And then as somebody who's got to reset it, it's time consuming.
Yeah.
So then that brings us to the next one, which is it's kind of like a small Morton building.
Yeah, it's a
small
Morton building with 2 different pitches on there.
Yeah, 2 different pitches, and that's the one that's got the split roof, like almost like a sawtooth roof.
Yeah.
So that you can ladder one side right up to the roof line, the other one, it's a little bit more difficult, but it can be done. And then they have the 4x4 pallets. So they take a pallet, lay it on the ground, take a 4x4 piece of OSB, zip screw that at the top, you slide it up on the roof, you drop it in the slot, and then you go up to work. Again, there's your target. Okay,
Right,
so now we're getting back into this walkable pitch with a target, one that's a steep pitch with a target. You're defeating OSB. That's it.
And with those pallets and how many recruits we're putting through, how many times you're rushing through and you're not putting the screws into the quote unquote rafters that are built into the pallets, or how many times those pallets, because we've ran out of material, are missing one of the rafters. So instead of a 4x4 box with 2 rafters coming down the middle because it's 16 on center, you're missing one rafter, or you're missing all the rafters together. So when they get the cuts, the pallets, the piece of OSB just falls right in, and they don't even get the experience of actually bashing in and clearing the roofing material out because it just falls in. That happens here at work all the time. Because we run out of material. The one that we have at work, we cut 2x4s the length of like 48 and like a half because of the size of the hole, and then we drop them in. We have joist hangers in there, but you get some newer members that aren't familiar. They're just trying to get the basics down with a saw, and they run right through the 2x4. Next thing you know, we're out of those 2x4s until the next shipment comes in. So that prop is nice to get up on a roof and do your cuts, but at the same time, we're missing the next steps of the ventilation hole. Great, we've made our cuts, but now we have to clear that hole of the material.
Yeah. Interesting. You said, so what's the next step? You mentioned that. What is the next step, and how come we're not getting there? I don't know if you've seen these things, but the Connex container burn buildings. I'm sure you've seen them, like the state fire chiefs. FDIC, I know, has a few. They are all over the place. These things are littered, but they're starting to get some new cool features to them. That on one of the props, they essentially build a rain roof. It's a steel rain roof.
Yeah.
They may shingle it and everything, and then there's a steel section cut out in the roof, so it's like embezzled, or not embezzled. That's not a word. It's lined. The hole is lined with steel, and then you can drop in 6x6, 2x6s, 2x8s, whatever you want for your rafter. And then down below at the roof of the container, right? So that's the angle. The hypotenuse is the roof that you can adjust however you want. Down inside the container, you can do the same thing. There's joist hangers, like they're welded in there.
Yeah.
These heavy duty things, so that if you're up there, you make your cut. Now you have to get your pole or whatever you're using and bang out the ceiling down below as well.
They put drywall down in there.
Yeah, which is, I think it's going back. Okay, we're still defeating a prop, but at the same point, we're starting to add in extra steps. So it's not just the mechanics of starting the saw, cutting OSB. Now we're taking it one step further.
Right.
With that, one of the other cool props I get to play with all the time. It's actually a county prop. It's a trailer. So it's an enclosed trailer that they did the same thing. They put a pitch on the roof. So when this thing's driving down the highway, it looks like half of a shed, being towed behind it. And you can do all sorts of things. It still drops in the pallet right into the hole on the roof, and you get up there and you cut it. But then there's boarding underneath that hole, so that you can spike it with a Halligan, hit it with a pickhead axe, whatever you want, so that you have options for footholds other than just throwing a roof ladder up there. It's really cool because this thing can now be mobile. So departments that are way, way, way out, on the far ends of the counties, they don't have to travel all the way inward to your county seat to, whatever your public safety training facility is, or training center, whatever you guys call it. They don't have to go 30-minute drive. It can come to you on your Monday night or Wednesday night drill, or if you're a paid department, hey, we want Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for these groups. And it's pretty cool. The downside is, again, OSB, or just if all you can get is just the pallets, it's just cutting pallets.
Yeah, that's another thing I see is you see videos of people up on roofs and they just drop a pellet in there, and it's like, all right, you're getting saw work done, but I've never encountered a pellet on top of a roof.
No, no. But okay, so we can dress these things up, right? We can keep dressing these things up and keep changing them. And it's the same thing when we talk about door props. Um, how do we take what we have to work with and just keep evolving it somehow? Okay. And talking with one of the guys we work with, he actually used to be one of your firemen. He got promoted to lieutenant. Just recently worked with him. We got talking about some different concepts, and as we got looking up, okay, well, you get up there, you go cut a hole. But if it's a small prop such as this trailer, it's not like you get a chance to search to find where exactly you want to cut that hole. Like you were saying, okay, am I hitting the boxes on the roof, or am I peeling back the ridge vent? How do I know where I'm gonna? Other than unless I have a window that's blowing or something, obvious sign down below, you don't get that searching effect. Okay, well, so that you don't get to put that in the equation. But what we can do next is, when we cut that hole, is something coming out at you? Are you on the right side of the hole? How do you navigate around that cut? What if you miscued and then you got to get down? What are your key indicators? So we're looking up, what is that? It's like movie smoke. So they make these things. It looks like literally a smoke grenade is what it is.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
it's a movie prop.
We used one at
you
the
pull the
hotel one
pin,
time.
you did?
Yeah,
I always want to do this. So these things are super cool. You can get them to last 15 seconds, 30 seconds, and a couple minutes, and they come, man, some of them look like a giant coffee can, like what we get at the firehouse, something like that. So you pull this pin and it just chugs. Well, you toss that inside oh yeah. You toss that inside of this trailer. Now you got this thing charged. So when you start, it's seeping, right? It's seeping out of the eaves, maybe the vent, the end vents and everything like that, cross vents. You start making your cut, your little inspection hole in the corner. Hey, you're going to get some signs. Okay. Hopefully you park this thing in the right area out on the front pad or whatever, so that you get to play the wind, a little bit in your cuts. Now we're adding one more thing to that mechanism, and that's recognizing how our wind shifting, how our smoke shifting.
Even at your county, I'm sure the county's got smoke machines. I think almost every department owns a smoke machine. And, how hard would it be to just plumb the smoke into the smoke machines, the smoke from the smoke machine into the trailer? You'd have to have some power, a Honda generator, bring it in there, plug it in, get the smoke going. That's something, when I was a training officer here, that was one of the projects I never got around to, was to put, sheathing on the underside of our roof prop, and then plumb smoke in so we could trap smoke into the void space. And when we cut, we had some smoke issuing from the hole that we cut. It was just one of the things I never got around to.
Well,
have you seen?
Go ahead.
I was just saying that, when you were talking about the trailer, I thought you were going to hit on that trailer that's just the roof prop trailer. Have you seen those?
Yes. Yeah. There's nothing underneath of it. It's kind of like half a pavilion.
Yeah, you could buy them that are on the trailer, and the lieutenant you were talking to, his volley department has like the in-house one, and it's pretty nice. Their training facility.
He dragged me out there. That is cool.
Yeah,
what they have working.
But once again, you're only getting, like, it's a lean-to essentially. There's no peak. Oh, that's, now I remember what I was going to say, but you're talking about the feedback and searching for the fire. That's something our props don't allow us to do. How many firemen don't, like, you own your own house. I'm sure you've gone up and walked on your roof to clean your gutters, right?
Many times.
Yeah. That was my job growing up as a kid. My old man was like, religiously, I had to clean the gutters. You walk up on any roof, they're spongy. I mean, they're not like falling through spongy, but they're not solid. There's a little give to these two roofs. And I think newer firemen think that little bit of sponginess on a roof thinks that the roof has been compromised, and it's not. And I think that's one thing that our roof props don't allow us to train our firemen or teach our firemen, like, what a spongy roof is, until you get to an actual structure fire. But then how many firemen are going to experience that how many guys are going up on the roof? Even if we do cut the roof, maybe at most 3, maybe 4. That's a company officer and 3 guys. And I think that's even too much up on the roof. So our department, we have 4 companies, 14 guys on scene plus the chief. Out of those 14 guys, you get a structure fire. 3 are getting up on the roof and maybe experience that sponginess factor. And then they have to go back to the hot wash, and hopefully they talk about it and pass it along at the kitchen table the next shift. Especially with our department being so young, a lot of these guys aren't knowing what the roof feels like at the point where you should cut or the point where you shouldn't go anymore. And bringing up a hook. I sent you that Instagram post where someone took a ball hitch and
yes,
they lopped off the chisel end of the Halligan hook, and they welded a 2-inch ball hitch onto the ends for a better sounding tool. I mean, they sell them out there with a ball on the end of them, but you take you sound with the chisel end of a hook, you're only getting a little bit amount of force in there. I'm not a big fiberglass pike pole fan bringing it up on the roof, but the butt end of the fiberglass pike pole is a better sounding tool than the hook. You look at the West Coast apartments, they bring those arson rakes up. It's got a wider base to it. It's going to give you better feedback. Something that our roof props just don't allow us to do it.
The Hooks Unlimited does have it's I forget what it's called. It's like a butt end. It looks like the end of a pipe screwed on. It's just a pipe cap on the end of it, and
it's got thick. The gas shut off on it. That's what
some of them do. Yeah. So I have seen those, but then you lose the prying ability when you need it. I think we tend to use that prying ability quite a bit,
right?
But having that freaking ball on there, and that you just reminded me, you could do this in the back of the bay or somebody at home with a welder. We've been making the joke around here a lot for the last couple of years that we want to put it on the request. Hey, chief, we want a little 120 MIG welder, but we already know how that's going to play out.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. Next thing you know, the ladder's got something welded on the side, all these custom things. No cup holders, no problem, chief. Oh no, it's for tools. It's just for tools. And
that welding thing came up with our force entry door. There's a couple things we want to do at our force entry door.
That's why I was going to bring it up again. Yeah, I think we could make some parts for it ourselves,
right?
Or our own touches,
right? Yeah, customize the force entry door a little bit more for some things that we've seen on other doors that we could put on our door, or just things we've noticed how we've operated and used different materials in our door. But talking about force entry doors, they are what they are, and there's a vast variety of force entry doors out there. From the blue door from Firehouse Innovations, the Troxfire door, which they have a nice system because you can put that on an existing door in your firehouse, or you can buy a standalone door. They got the HR Mechanics or something. That's a nice door because it has the other props on it. You sent me that other door with it's got like the compression on there, so you don't need
Staubs, I think it's called.
Staubs door.
I can't find too many places that sell them, but it's interesting, at least for basic. Again, the basic mechanics, getting it down, especially if you can't come up with consumables to relock this thing. They're handy as hell.
Right.
But you can't advance further than your regular gap set force, with the Halligan and Axe.
And that's something we were talking about the other night is I would, I'm just making this up, but I would say 90% of the doors that you come across where you don't need a power tool, you can force a door if you stick to the basics. Try, shock, gap set, force, clear, control. You do those steps, you're going to force the majority of the doors you come across. And I cannot stand where it's like week 3 of the firefighter training series and we're teaching they're not even probationary firemen, they're still recruit firemen. We're teaching them quote unquote tricks to me, they're not even tricks, they're hacks because they're defeating the door prop. These door props have been forced, what would you guess? Tens of thousands of times, some of these doors.
They're getting pretty hammered.
Yeah, the metal on them is all knurled. It's got, gouges in it. It's got burrs on them. So the tools won't slip because of the gouges in there. And they do these weird maneuvers with the Halligan, and it's like, yes, this works on the force entry door where you're breaking pieces of pine. But when you come across, a residential door that has, a 1 inch by ½ inch, if that, door stop held in by staples, you do that maneuver, you're just blowing out the door stop. And then you're not
getting any bite on the actual door.
Right. Or if you come across,
in fact, you're using the door to pry off of.
Right. And if you come across you go to the Charlie side of a commercial structure and you're told to open up and force these Charlie side doors, and you try to do those maneuvers with that on a door that hasn't been worked like our force entry doors, the tool's going to slip. It's not going to bite. And the maneuvers that they're doing, you're not getting the maximum force out of your tool. You were talking about the one where they take they get the initial gap, and everybody knows what the gap is. You put the adze in, bury it to the stop, and you pry down or you pry up on the bar to get your 2-inch gap because the adze is 2 inches wide. So you get a 2-inch gap between the stop and the door. And then they rotate the adze 90 degrees. So the adze is either pointing up or pointing down. And depending on the orientation of the bar, they push up or they push down. Now, at one point in my life, I was a geek. I studied physics. I went to school for physics. And there's rotational forces. Now, if that force is the force generated on that Halligan, the bar is either going to bite into the door or it's going to bite into the stop. At some point, one of those parts of the Halligan is going to move. So the door is softer than the stop. So that if the door is softer than the stop, then the Halligan's going to bite into the door and rotate on the stop. So if they do that maneuver where the adze is vertical or where the adze is vertical in a downward orientation or an upward orientation, you're also losing mechanical advantage because the adze is 6 inches long. Your other lever is 30 inches long. So now your lever equation
5-1.
Yeah, you have a 5-1 at this point. The other maneuver I've seen is where they don't even get a gap. They set the adze all the way in, and instead of prying up or down for the gap, they pry out. So now the Halligan, the corner of the Halligan is biting into the door, and the adze is prying up against the stop, and because of the rotational forces, it's going to pop right out every time. Now, on the force entry doors, it might bite in because there's grooves and the metal's been knurled and there's been it's dented and it's got something to bite into. And there was an article I wrote. It got into fire engineering, and I hit on this topic. I said, this hack. It's a hack. I'm not saying it doesn't work. It shouldn't be your go-to move. And we were talking about the firehouse, and I was taking pictures for the article, and my fireman was like, "Oh, I've done this before." I'm like, "Yeah, you've done it on the door prop, but it's not going to work on it. It doesn't work on a door." What are the chances we get a check to welfare call for some lady in an apartment complex and she fell and whatever? So we had a force entry. So he's like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that technique. She was down. She was talking to us. She just couldn't get up. So I'm like, all right, go ahead, man. So he puts the adze in there and he goes to force it, and the Halligan pops right out and he falls. Now, how this apartment complex is set up, if I wasn't standing where I was, he would have took a tumble down a flight of stairs. And I looked at him, I go, "You trust me now? Do you believe me that doesn't work?" He goes, "Yeah, I'll force it. I'll do it the right way." I go, "All right, so let's do it the right way."
So what you're saying is your teaching style is let them touch the hot stove. You
You
encourage
know,
them to touch the hot stove. It's
yeah,
guaranteed results every time.
you know who that one is, and sometimes
I
you
do.
gotta
I
let
do.
him touch the hot stove to figure out that he's what's right and what's wrong. But back to these recruits doing these tips and tricks, I'll call them hacks. On week 3, they get to truck company operations week, and then they start doing those, and we've stepped the game up on the force doors. Instead of just putting one piece of,
Yes.
1x1 pine in as a locking mechanism, we're putting, PVC in there. There's sometimes, if I get a piece of scrap aluminum, don't ask me where I got the scrap aluminum from, but like a 1.5 inch wide by quarter inch, or maybe a piece of stock aluminum. We've used square conduit tubing, stainless steel tubing, because it bends really well. They start doing those tricks that they've learned in week 3, and they don't work. And then they get frustrated. And I look and I go, whatever happened to the basics? Tri-shock gap set force clear control. And like, we saw these tips and tricks, and they work. They force it. They pop the doors real easy. I'm like, yeah, I know, because you're forcing a 1x1 piece of pine. And it's like, come on, guys. When the national testing comes around, yes, you get like 10 minutes to force a door per whatever the national standards are. I haven't looked at a skill sheet for a national standard in a while, but it's like, if you would just slow down to speed up, that's a saying a lot of guys say in the fire service, and do the basics and master the basics, you don't need these tips and tricks. These tips and tricks, they're just defeating the prop. Well, and the other thing is, with the force doors, you look at any of the force doors, what's the big yellow, sometimes they're red, it's got lettering in the middle, the circle with the line going through it says, don't do this. Don't shock the door. So then they come up and they do these little taps.
Soft tap.
Yeah, soft tap to go through the motions. I've seen a fireman on a fire go up to a door, and instead of shocking it, he just did these soft taps. I was like, what are you doing? Because I'm shocking the door. And it occurred to me, that's all they did for 13 weeks when they went through the fire academy, is these soft shocks on these doors. Because it's muscle memory at this point. And it's like, no, bro, just shock the door as hard as you can. And what the force doors don't let you do is, when you shock the door, shocking the door is telling you where the locking mechanisms are. And because it's a force entry door, especially, a couple of the brands out there, that wood or whatever material you use to keep the door closed, keep the door locked, are in the same spot every time, which are majority in America where the locks are. They're, waist height where the doorknobs are located. But you get in some of the more secure areas, you're going to have multiple locks. And if you don't shock the door, you're not going to know there's locks there. In the majority of America, locks are going to go from the doorknob up, because people are inherently lazy and they don't want to bend over to lock doors. But you can come across locking mechanisms that are at down low. You go to the old Italian neighborhood that's not really the Italian neighborhood anymore, and there's a couple of houses that have the door club. And for anybody that's going to listen that's didn't live through the 90s as seen on TV commercials, the door club, it was like TGIF, and Full House was on. It was always like one of those infomercials that played during the commercials. Door club, you can still buy them at Home Depot. You can buy them online. It looks like it's a contraption that you drill the hole through the floorboards. You put a receiver down through that hole you drilled, and then this locking mechanism sits into the receiver tight up against the door. If you take the mechanism out and you spin it 180 degrees and you set it in, it allows the door open like a 2 or 3 inch gap, like how the old chains used to be opened up.
Right.
So, but if you don't shock the door, you're never going to know that's there. You could just start going to force, and then the door starts bowing at the top, or you defeat the deadbolt, you defeat the knob lock, and now the door's not going anywhere because you had this contraption in the floor. There's other stuff out there. There's Bluetooth, like the Barracuda locking mechanism. It's a wedge that pops out of the floor. There's other stuff out there. There's a lot of locking mechanisms out there, that police invent or whatever. But I've seen one that it was Bluetooth. You walked out of your house, you pick up your phone, you hit the button to lock the door, and this wedge comes out of the floor and wedges the entire bottom of the door. And
oh, no kidding. I haven't seen that.
But there's nothing we can simulate on a force entry door that.
No, but kind of along the same concept, with the advent of the active shooter training, that it's becoming more and more prevalent, especially in the schools, not just for first responders, but also for, teachers and administrators of these school systems. They're giving them, or at least providing them with these different mechanisms to lock school doors. So it actually plays off those old, like you said, the 90s infomercial door locks. Some of these things, it's like a flat piece of metal. It slides underneath the door, expands out, and it wraps the door frame, and it locks in place.
Yeah.
They have the old ones. I'm drawing a blank on this. I want to say it's like a night latch. In America, they were called night latches. I think it's like a steel rod that drops into the floor. Essentially, you ream out a hole in the floor, you sleeve it with, whatever it was, brass or copper, and then that way, and it sat flush. It was a hole that sat flush with your floor, and then at night you drop this pin down in it, and it butts up to so it's kind of like a picket. It spikes down into your floor, and then it's up against the door at the same time, so the door can't open.
Was it up against the doorknob, or was it right up against the door?
No, this is at the bottom, at the floor. Sorry. So they have stuff like this now. It looks like a railroad spike that you drive into this hole, and the top sits out. 3, 4, 5 inches. Yeah. So it essentially creates a stop that doesn't allow the door to open up. That used to be a thing that they used to sell. I remember I think my dad's parents had one similar to that. My grandfather probably made it. Just drove an actual railroad spike in the floor, but
that railroad spike in there.
But they have these crazy mechanisms out there, and you can easily take something. So going with our props, you can take stuff like this and then convert one of these commercial doors. You don't have to. By commercial, I mean one of these manufactured training props. You don't have to just keep whaling the same door over and over again just because it accepts, a 2x2 by 14-inch piece of pine doesn't mean that's all you're stuck with.
Right.
Start getting creative.
The biggest problem I see with those, using the wood is good for getting the basics down, but what doesn't it do? It doesn't give you feedback.
There's no spring in the door.
Right. And
the only feedback you get is a crack, and you go, "Oh, I'm almost there," and it doesn't come back on you.
You hear the crack, and you're like, "Yeah, I got it." But what good instructors need to tell their students or their companies, good company officers, when they're doing force entry training, is you're not trying to, a residential door, unless and they just had it on one of the cable news networks, like they were doing a morning sales pitch for security systems because of the way the world is right now. Unless, and all they were doing is they were selling like a beefed up receiver for your tubular deadbolt, and then they were selling like 10-inch screws, hardened steel screws that went in. So, and they had this linebacker size ex-police officer, retired police officer, I shouldn't say ex, he was a retired police officer, and he's trying to do, the donkey kick through the door, and he wasn't getting it because that everything was reinforced. Now, if it's not reinforced and you just take, the quick set or the shillage package off the shelf of Home Depot or Lowe's, and you put those 4-inch screws in there, and it's just set into maybe the one stud, you didn't hit into the jack stud, you didn't hit the king stud, you didn't get into anything real structural. A normal force, you're probably blowing out the receiver on a residential door. But you come up to a commercial door, or you have one of these reinforced doors that, a homeowner is very security conscious. That's the point where you're going to try the tubular deadbolt is you're trying to spread the door away from the frame and pop the deadbolt out of the receiver. You're not going to blow the receiver out of the frame if they're reinforced, especially on a commercial door. You need to you're trying to slide that, you're trying to create enough gap, enough force where it's going to pop out of that receiver. And wood doesn't mimic that at all. All the wood does is create resistance for the initial gap. And you've seen it. How many times do you put that one piece of 1x pine in there? They hit the gap and the door's forced at that point. You put and the forks is just, an afterthought, just to go through the motions. That's why
I just recently did all that renovation on the house. I had all that, freaking hardwood.
Yeah.
I had some old oaks. I brought that in, threw it in the pile, and hey, good luck, kids. If I'm trying to figure out which one's which, but you soak that in water overnight.
Right, but we've used like Schedule 80 PVC that works well. The piece of aluminum that worked really well. We went dumpster diving. We found that square tubing. It was like conduit for the plaza they were building behind the firehouse. I thought that was some of the best stuff that we used.
That little aluminum tubing one?
Yeah, it was square stock.
That's still here somewhere, floating around. It's all bent to hell, but
yeah,
that was really cool.
That worked well, but the best I found is you got to use a combination if you're going to do it right. You got to use a wood to give that initial resistance, and then if you use like PVC or a thin piece of aluminum or that square stock steel, that's because that's what gives you the feedback on the door. Now another thing, and it was just by circumstance, pretty much laziness on my part. I had like a 8-foot piece of PVC pipe, and instead of cutting it down to 14-inch sections for each force, I just threw the whole 8-foot piece in and put this how our force door is. It's got the legs, it's got the braces that come down at an angle, and I just jammed it up against there. That was that's the length it needs to be. And then what happened, because the PVC was sticking so far out past the door, they would force it, and they might break the wood, and they might pop the PVC, but because the PVC was going past the door, past the frame, it was actually acting like a spring mechanism and pushing the door back onto them. So they actually had to physically clear the door, and then the PVC would bend. So that was giving good feedback.
So what you're saying is it overhung on the hinge side.
Correct. Yeah.
We've seen some other crazy stuff. Like I know you and your crew just keep adding things that make the door tougher, all the way up to including chains. I've seen that, some wires. It's just at some point it becomes a pride thing, or it's just a company level kick around in the back of the truck bay at the end of the night as you're winding down, having the after dinner coffee. But it's kind of cool to see. Are we going to be finding all this stuff where a lock's passing through a chain's passing through a PVC into a sleeve that's mounted on the back? Probably not. I haven't yet. The point is what's another method of defeating that door? So instead of just going at it the same way, how do we get, we know we put the adds in, we make our gap, right? Add before we move, maybe flip that around, get to the forks, or drive the adds in past the door frame instead of just at the stop, right? We're setting up our gap set force scenarios, but then what happens when you can't force it? Okay, we got too much something on the other side. Either we need to move what we're attacking because, like you said, it's a hip level. Maybe it's something as we got to go higher, or we work this thing like can opener, start low, move up high, start high, move up, move down low, because there's multiple locks. Or is it just that one singular lock at hip level is super tough? Okay, now what do we do? We're going to add a cheater bar. We're going to add 2 Halligans. We're going to add, we're going to start playing into the other realms. What else do we have so that we're priming ourselves for these decisions, not just going, oh, well, all we trained on was the Halligan and the axe. I don't know what to do now.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, add in more leverage to these forces. I'd rather see get the basics done, tri-shot, gap set, force, clear, control. And then if that doesn't work, if you can't get it with those steps, add more leverage. Don't go to a trick, because if those basics didn't work, the tricks probably aren't going to work either. Or these little hacks that you see on the internet, they're probably not going to work. So add some leverage. Put a 6-foot hook in there. Add leverage. Marry up 2 Halligans. Or force the door with 2 Halligans. I sat through I think it was a force. I think it was strictly force entry. It was a lecture by Midwest Firemen, and they showed us. He went through a whole slideshow of how they force the doors in their company. It was pretty interesting. They slide the Halligan, because if you put the forks up against the door, where the bevel is to the jamb, not bevel to the door, so the forks will go in easier. But if you do it that way, the forks will slide out during the force. But what they do is they'll slide the forks very forcefully along the door, and because at that point the way the forks are orientated, it's an inclined plane, and it will actually create a gap for you. Then what they'll do is they'll take the other Halligan and they'll set the forks in, now what we would call the wrong way, because the bevel's to the jamb, and they put the forks in all the way. And then once they get a good gap with those forks, they take the second Halligan and put bevel to the door at this point, underneath or on top, depending on which way the Halligan's orientated.
So essentially, they're just using the forks like a wedge.
Correct.
To help get the gap.
They put the other set of forks in with bevel to the door, and then they both force at the same time.
Right.
To me, that's not a trick, because you're still using the Halligan the way it's supposed to be used. The forks are doing the forcing. You're not putting the triangle method in. You're not, doing these funky forces with the adz-ons. The forks are being set into the door frame, and they're being forced into the door. And the other thing, if we talk about forcing, is how many times you see firemen or new firemen, they want to bounce the forks in and out. It's like, no, you start bouncing, and it's going to take those forks and work. All that work you did to get those forks into where properly set against the door and the door frame, and then you start bouncing that tool, they're going to work right out. And now you're back to setting them back in. Constant pressure.
And if you don't get that down at the very first lesson, so, say it's firefighter 1 type of thing, you only advance so far in firefighter 1, firefighter 2, or whatever your first fire basic course is in the academy. If you don't hit those in the first 2 weeks, which we call the firefighter training series, before going on to the rest of the truck week, engine week, you name it. If you don't get that stuff hammered down on what you're looking at, you're just kind of going through, okay, we got the mechanism, but we got the mechanism of I'm moving the Halligan, I'm placing the forks in, I'm moving it towards the door opens up. Okay, well, when I start bouncing, what's happening? Well, now you're, like you just said, you're literally bouncing on a place. And then you start seeing that come to fruition where you really should have had it dialed in, is when they start masking up and blacking out. Sorry, not, what I mean? By blacking out, we mean we put something over your mask, not, imbibing too much. But you do a low vis scenario, and then they cannot tell that they're bouncing it out of that, out of place.
Right.
And they get frustrated. Why is this not working? I'm running through the same thing. I'm shocking or sounding, gapping, setting, forcing, and controlling, and then clearing. They're trying to go through the same steps, but they're not, right? That crawl, walk, run thing happens so quickly at the basic level, and then we move on and you want to hurry up and show them all the tricks that they miscue on the fine points.
Right. That's why when I ran the academy, I was no tricks, no tricks. And then the next academy that, I wasn't running it, but I came in as a lead instructor for truck week and a couple other classes. I wasn't there for the firefighter training series due to my schedule. And I tried to tell the lead instructor no tricks, but some of the instructors went back and showed them these tricks. So then they got to truck week. It's like, all right, we need to forget everything You just learn because we're going back to the basics. And then the
which
next,
is tough.
right, which is tough. And then the next one, I convinced the lead instructor, let me come in for it. If you can't have me for all of the training series for the truck stuff during the training series, at least let me come in there for the force entry stuff so we don't have to take 4 steps back to go 2 steps forward again. We talked about the other night, just basic body position, and they're not understanding it. And I don't know if that's an instructor fault. I don't know if it's just common sense, but they set the forks in there and then they're trying to pull they're between the door and the tool at this point. And it's like, let's stop and think about what we're doing here. Yes.
Yeah, when it doesn't go, then they bounce it too.
Yeah, then they're bouncing it. It's like, just take a second. The bar is wedged in there. It's tight against the door. It's not going to fall out. Just let go of the bar or hold on to a bar and walk around to the other side and then get on it. The other thing I can't, with the props is, in these classes, and you see it even at the company level, you get the 120-pound, he might be 100, 200 pounds in his gear soaking wet, and he's on the end of this bar and he's struggling. And then you see Mongo standing there with the axe just looking at him. And it's like, dude, get on the bar and help. Some of these guys, all they have to do is look at the Halligan and the door pops open because they're that big. And then you stick the smallest guy in the bar because he's got good technique or whatever. And then he goes to try to force it. And it's like, it's just physics. It just doesn't have the mass to finish the force. You need somebody maybe with, that can actually finish the force. I don't know if that's really defeating the prop. We're just talking about training props here, but it's a lot of things that, guys got to take in consideration when teaching, especially with a force entry door.
Well, there's still good things to talk about because it's okay. These aren't all wrong. They're just different, and really comes down to timing of your programming as a firefighter. Okay, if you start showing tricks too soon before you've really hammered out the basics, I forget who it is. I know I was just listening. It was either to another podcast or I was reading an article. Somebody said, "Hey, if there's one thing you need to be good at, it's the basics. Master the basics, and that'll get you through your entire career. By career, I mean volunteer or paid. Doesn't matter. If you hammer those basics hard enough and come to mastery, all that other stuff it's out the window, right?
Yeah.
Because that's 90% of the work done right there. Easy, right? Good customer service. Where this all comes from is, so I actually have a couple notes here that I wrote down. Somebody gave me another article a while back. It's called RPD, Recognition Prime Decision Making. Okay. Now, the article, I printed it off. It's by Michael G. Emilio, who's a fire officer out of Oklahoma City Fire Department. So props to him. And at least at the time that he was writing this, or he wrote this, he was a lieutenant. This is quite a few years ago now. And it goes into kind of more of an officer base or an IC at a fire ground. So the command structure. And what he's saying is, hey, you kind of have to have experience over and over again to recognize. I think you said it best as like slideshows. It's kind of like building out your Rolodex. So when you pull up to something, whether it's a job or it's a small task on a job, okay, such as forcing a door, you recognize what you're looking at, and then you go, oh, I know where that is. It's in my Rolodex. You flip to that, pull out that cue card, and run it because you've run that a million times. If you only have the tricks, so the cool stuff, that's kind of like having all the Z's packed in your Rolodex. You have nothing from A through Y.
Right.
That's one way of putting it.
Now, for people that don't know what a Rolodex is, it was a thing.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. That's fair.
It's almost like it was this box that had like 3x5 cards on them, and you could spin the wheel, and people could put addresses in there or notes or recipes and contact cards. Now people have PowerPoints or whatever.
Cell phones. It was essentially what your contacts do in your phone. It's instead of it being a file, one file with a bunch of lists of names, it was these little cards you can pull in and out.
Way off topic, but a good segue. the probie that I had before they just did the rotation on my group, every time
The
we
one
did
that's still
train,
gotta fix that hole in the wall?
no, the one in
Oh,
between, the one in
okay.
between. Every time we did training, and it was like it kind of took me back a little bit. Every time we did training, he would take pictures with his phone with things, and then go into his notes on his phone and write notes down and attach the pictures into his
Oh,
notebook
interesting.
on his phone. That's where we are in the fire service right now. Is like everybody, they have their notebook in their pocket. So there is time and place for phones. I kind of made a rule when we got our probies that our probies can't have phones at the kitchen table because they should be listening and not scrolling on their phones. And for a while we were like, no phones during training. But then when I saw him take his phone out and taking pictures of things and attaching the pictures to the notes he was taking, and he was asking earnest questions about everything. Hey, Kat, what's this? Why do we do this, or what's going on here? And he's sitting there and he's typing up notes on his phone to review later or reference back. And I'm like, man, this kid's on his game. Where before it was either I had to get a notebook out, and take notes, handwritten notes
Yeah,
about stuff, and
I keep a
I'm
Write in
sure,
the Rain little pad in my pocket all the time,
right. Well, I'm sure you caught the tail end of how our department used to be. The old salty guys that, are all gone now. If you started taking notes about stuff, you'd probably get ridiculed for about 3 days. What, you don't know this type of thing?
I still got, these, what are these? The legal pads. I blow through them weekly. I keep ordering a bunch of them because I have to have a physical note of some sort. I started getting into the iPad to take it, but I'm working on it. It's taking
Yeah,
time. I've gone
still,
back to the pen and paper.
I'm still a pen and paper guy. I got notebooks strewn across my house in my Jeep. I think there's 2 notebooks full of notes in my gear locker. I mean,
That's just, but that's what we're used to. How we,
yeah,
I think, came up, and that's how school was. That's how we defeated the prop of life.
Right.
Oh, I see what we did there. Huh?
Yeah. But I will say, my daughter's 6th grade reading teacher. Yes, they had a reading class. It wasn't English. It was reading. The teacher actually spent 15 minutes a day of how to teach these kids how to take notes. And I was like, that is a awesome life skill to have, because I don't think kids know how to take notes anymore. But that's another topic for another day.
We'll have to circle back to that on another one, because there's I'm gonna have to take some notes about taking notes. Where were we? Oh, the RPD thing. So, anyways, so the original article from Fire Engineering, it was all about command structure. So it kind of fell along the lines of SOG driven departments versus just a instant commander driven. So kind of like how you operate on your fire grounds per se, or your actual calls. Well, how I read that was, and this is how I teach too, is a big thing, is I want people to be primed with as many different things, but I'm not going to show you the next step, or I'm not going to move on to B in the Rolodex or B in your contact list if you haven't really solidified on A. But my goal is to give you A through Z. And right now, me is at my level, dude, I might only be at A, B, and C. I'm still learning myself, so I pick up just as much as when I train. It kind of flows both ways. But in the Fire Academy, it's a little bit different. We're programming these people. But what I took out of this RPD thing is that is your training on the sum of it. You can break that down to the little microcosm that is the back of the truck bay training. Even with the forcible entry door, the more experience that we have doing it, in other words, the more reps, the easier it becomes to recognize. We're literally priming our brains. So when I walk up to that a door, I go, oh, that's a steel door. I'm pulling tactics A, B, or C. Oh, that's a residential hollow core door. I'm doing D, E, and F. I'm primed with those decisions. If I walk up to something I don't know, it's trial and error until I get it, and that takes time. That takes time on the fire ground. It takes time for whatever, rescues, you name it, and that just kind of stuck out to me. So that's kind of why we train on all these things. And the development of props really came to be, not only because we don't have vegans, but also because we need to get reps in.
Yeah,
So now
and
it's how do we take those props and don't just hammer on them the same way, the same way, the same style from that you did day one when you pulled that out of the box when it shipped to you.
right, and that's your new fireman is not going to have the amount of slides in their slideshow for their recognition prime decision making, but then your senior, as you go through your career, your slideshow gets bigger. Hopefully, as a company officer, your slideshow is even bigger, and as a chief officer, your slideshow is bigger than the company officer. We could dive into the OODA loop. That's all part of what we're talking about. But when we're training, and then you go to a job, and the lieutenant that was working here last night, he picked it up from me. I'm not saying I probably picked it up from somebody else, probably from sports, is like I give my guys 3 tries. If they got their way, that's the way they want to do it. I give them 3 tries. If it doesn't work after the 3rd try, we're moving on to something else, because that way isn't working, and I'm not going to waste my time doing that. That's where they're stuck. Well, you talk about the OODA loop, which is the same thing. You're talking about the same thing as requisition prime decision making. They're stuck. They've observed the problem. They're orientating what their solution is going to, how they want to attack that problem that they observed. They've decided that this is the best way to do it, and then they act on it. And then if it doesn't work, they're stuck in that cycle. They're stuck. They can't go back. They can't observe that their tactic is wrong, and then they don't reorientate to something else. So then they're stuck, and you see it, they freeze. That's where a good company officer or a good senior fireman can come in and say, hey, bro, this way is not going to work. The reason why is because, the roof we're on, this is the type of roof that this cut isn't going to work, or this door has this type of locking mechanism on it. We have to do, X, Y, Z. We can't do ABC here type of thing. And that comes with experience. It comes from training, but it also comes from real life experience that sometimes we just don't get. But you can get that. You can build that slideshow. You don't have to go to train. You don't have to work on a training prop. Companies do building safety inspections. Companies do, some companies are out there actually doing actual fire marshal inspections or pre-plans or whatever you do in your department. And when you go out, take some time to look at things like Charlie side doors. Look at the locking mechanisms. There's a liquor store up on the north side of town. They have slide latches that are lag bolted into the door. It's not just, the 2-inch brass screws that come with a slide latch. And the slide latch is probably 8 inches long. And it's lag bolted. We would never know that unless we got into that structure and looked at it. You might find these home, drop bars in there, maybe with a 2x4 or a piece of stock steel or something like that. Just looking at that and discussing it is going to help you build that slideshow. It's not going to give you the full Monty of actually forcing the door, but when you come across something like that, you'll know in your head, oh, this is what's going on behind that door. I might have to do something else.
Yeah, get the saw.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But and okay, so how do you simulate that? One thing that comes to mind is there's a restaurant in town, recently renovated within the last year and some change. We went in there for a smoke alarm going off all the time. So they put a smoke head right above the oven in this restaurant. Why? I don't know. New management, whatever. So we happened to be in there, and I went out the back door. When I went to the back door, there was a drop bar on the rear door of this restaurant. I'm like, oh man, all right, we could put that in the pre-plan, right? I'm like, oh, the hell with it. Let's see what the outside looks like. And I was going to snap a picture. Oh, there you go. Okay, so I'm not just writing stuff down, because I grabbed my phone and snapped the picture. And when I went to the outside, opened up the door, looked on the backside, there's no bolt heads. So I went back in and say, the manager, I'm like, hey, what's this drop door or this drop bar on this door. Where'd you guys get that? Oh, we had that custom made. So somebody literally, they cut the door apart, welded the bolts and everything to the inside of this thing, and then welded the door back together so that from the outside you can't tell that there's a drop bar. And that was his security style.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's cool if I take some pictures. Yeah, he was totally fine with them. Oh, good, because I already did. But just something that stood out had we not known. So now we go back to our props. Okay, we're only working with the little pieces of wood that we're smashing. Put this in the win column or the pro column for when we request for the Chiefs. Hey, Chief, we had that welder. We could put some drop bars on the back of this door.
Right.
But this stuff is out there, and we do got to get creative with these props, not just doing the same thing over and over again. And that's what I was trying to say, is that all these ideas, whether it's buying all these different props because they each do something slightly different, don't just get stuck on, hey, I bought the yellow door, so I can only force it the yellow door's recommended way over and over again. Well, that's great.
Right.
You're only going to know how to force the yellow door. And the only place that the yellow doors exists is in the back bay of the firehouse. The blue door is out on the training facility. Well, the only thing that teaches you how to defeat the blue door. It gives you the mechanics, but not the would you say the not reverb, the feedback.
The feedback.
Yeah, the feedback of what you're dealing with.
I mean, and you just said it too. Like there's props for everything. Even the door system that we have in our department. We have a standalone door, and we have another door, and for a nominal price, we could have bought the more customization to the standalone door that has a cut prop in the middle of the door to defeat a drop bar. But it was more money than we were willing to pay for that door. Everything's got a price for it, but it's probably something we could fabricate.
Yeah, if only we had a torch and a welder.
Right. Yeah. But thankfully we have a dude that works at our firehouse that's like a magician with for metalwork. And I've talked to him about some stuff that we could do with our door, and he's like, yeah, I could do it. Just give me the approval. He made some window props for us. He made window props for the county. He made window props for another department, because we have probably the first window prop that was on the market. I forgot who made it, whatever company made it. I mean, it's a phenomenal prop for what it does. But one thing I've noticed, it's like almost like playing a video game. There's 6 panels, and then there's the center sash, which is held in by dowels. That's the one we have. The one that he makes, it's 6 panels, and the center sash is held in by the spring mechanisms that welders use to hold down stuff. I don't weld. I'm not a metal worker, but they're spring latches. And what's nice about that is they're easily resettable instead of putting the dowels in, especially if the dowels are wet or you got gloves on and you're trying to in a smoked out burn house. But what I've seen with these window props, and it annoys me to all end, is, we tell firemen, when you break a window, where do you break the window first? Up high. So then they take their hook or their Halligan and they knock out. They just go down the line, 1, 2, 3, and they knock out the 3 panels, and then they knock out the lower 3 panels, 1, 2, 3. And then they smash the center sash. I said, is that how you're really going to break a window when you're on scene? Well, no. I said, then how are you going to break a window when you're on scene? Well, I'm going to smash the window as hard as I can. I go, then do that. That's what you're doing here. Take your hook, smash the window, rip out the center sash, and then clear the window like you normally would. Oh. But then you go to a fireground and you see guys go up to a window of a new fireman that's out of the academy, and they take their hook and they 1, 2, 3. And it's like, well, first of all, now we're working with double pane glass, and you got to hit these windows. They're not going to bust out like the plexiglass that's in these window props. And they're like, you see that, especially on a second floor window, when someone's got a long hook, it comes back on them. It's like, bro, you got to hit these windows. some of the older houses that we have, they have the wood frame windows with a single pane glass in there. Sure, you could probably, touch those especially if the glass is hot enough. You could probably, blow on those and they'll knock out.
You still got to clear all of the shards.
You still got, you still got to clear it all out. And the what's weird, dangerous about those single pane glass windows is the shards are a lot bigger than your double pane windows. And some windows now, some windows out there are safety glass. They'll bust out just like a car window will. Older car windows, because now the transportation authority says they hit, cars after what certain year had to be all Lexan glass, not the laminate glass all around the car for safety features. But, luckily we don't live in a hurricane area where we have to, by code, have hurricane windows. You go down south where they get hurricanes, they're not breaking that glass with a hook. I've seen videos. FDIC, they had some hurricane glass windows, and you're cutting those windows. And the other thing is, talking about bashing stuff out, is your wall props when we do survival week or survival skills. And we've gotten better at our academy because it was something we stressed upon, is we make these wall stud props and we slide the piece of drywall between the studs. So you're looking at studs.
I want to say that one of the lieutenants thought of this year, or maybe you guys had this conversation, because what they did is we started
doing double-sided. Mm-hmm. We made the wall prop, and then we started putting drywall screws through you could see the drywall screws, so you still knew where the studs were, but now you had 2 layers of drywall to go through. And it also stressed on the firemen that once you clear the hole and the drywall's busted, you can get through it. But that old school style, where it was laziness on the instructors, we'll make two pieces or 2 walls with studs, and then we'll slide a piece of drywall in between them. Well, it's like, now you know where the studs are. And then the studs were also clean. And by clean, mean there was no wires in them. There's nothing to get tangled on. So what did we do? We ran wire through our studs.
Wires, piping.
Yeah, because that's what you're gonna find. You might be doing an escape through a wall. You might be, doing a low profile escape through a wall and going through a wall. You pick the wrong wall. Maybe you're in a bathroom, and the cast iron clean out isn't the wall that you picked, and you're not going through. You're not getting through that. Or you have wire running through walls. Electricians will run wire everywhere. So now you have to get around that. You need to have some imagination when you're working with props. The props are good at face value, but a good company officer, a good instructor will have some imagination to make the prop more real life. And that's where they have to take back real life experience. Like, I've ran into this. Or you have an instructor that was in the trades, a general contractor, or he's an electrician, or he's a plumber. And they're like, this is how we run the lines through walls, or this is how plumbing is stacked up in the walls. And this is the way we should set up this wall type of, how we do this. The apartment that we put in the basement for searching and hose line stretching. One of the things we did was we put heat registers at the base of windows. The reason is because if you're trying to find a window in an emergency, and you run your hand low and high, if your hand's low and you miss the window, but you feel a heat register, you should shoot right up, because most likely there's a window, because that's where they put heat.
Right, that's
heat
your air curtain and everything.
Right.
So, all right. So this is a good place to kind of point this out. So a couple things that we can do here to help increase our training on the same props, right? We're not saying go out, buy a whole different. If you have the blue door, go buy the red door. If you have the red door, go get the out. That's not what we're saying. But some of the things that we're coming upon is just keep improving your prop. So the wall stud one, right? That thing it's still the same wall stud prop that we built 3-4 years ago.
I think the
Something like
original
that.
wall. I think the original stud prop was built probably 10 or 12 years ago. And
Then we added putting the drywall slide in it, and then we added, drywall on one side. Now it's drywall on both sides. Now it's the wires running in between. Then it's wires running in between with some conduit. We're adding to it. But what still has not gotten done is, especially with the bigger people, the little skinny guys, right on through, no problem. Big guys, they get jammed up on there, and they need to feel that jam because, again, we're trying to prime their decision making, right? As they move through it, that wall is shifting around on the back patio, the front the front of the truck bay, wherever, it's shifting around. So in other words, okay, next stage, we need to find a way to pin that to the ground or hard mount it. So whether that's even in a wall itself that we're not using in an outbuilding or something, or underneath a pavilion, or just like we're talking about that door lock where you run some, drill some holes in the asphalt out back, you sleeve them, and then, hey, you create these little pins that you can drop down in there. Okay, now you can pin your props literally to the floor, but outside.
The one thing, and we talked about, because my senior man was always like, I'm never going to take my pack off to go through a wall. And when he went through the fire academy, his fire academy, they had vacants. So they got to run the gamut of all their training except for live fire in vacants, which was phenomenal training. And what their instructors, he has some of probably the best, well-respected instructors, I would say, in the nation. And they'll never admit it. But what they would say, what they told the recruits was, if you're going to go through a wall, don't take your pack off. Take your Halligan or whatever tool you have, or if you have to, do the donkey kick the bottom of the stud out. Now, it's probably
make a bigger hole.
Make a bigger hole. And we tried it, and the problem was with the prop that we built, the original prop. I don't know if you remember it. We had one set of studs that had door hinges on the top, and then they had two. We would put dowels in the bottom to hold it in place. So once they broke out the drywall, they could take their Halligan and smash the bottom of that one stud, and it would act like breaking the stud out from the nailer.
The top had a hinge, right?
The top had a door hinge on it. Yeah.
Yep. I do remember this.
The problem was that the JPR, your JPRs each year that says you have to do it for, our 101 hours of in-service training, or even your firefighter 1 JPR say you have to do a low profile escape. And after a while, that stud got worn out and splintered and all this other stuff. I think it was like athletic taped at one point to keep it in place. Guys would they didn't have to do they knew where that stud was, and they would just go through it, and they would get, checked off for doing their escape. But it's a good option to, once they get the partial escape completed, that JPR checked off. All right, now if you do come across a stud, you can take your Halligan and bash the bottom of it and hopefully dislodge it from the nailer plate, and make the hole bigger. Especially if you're doing escape and it's not just you. You might have, a company with you, and you have to seek refuge in another room. Do you really want to get tied up with somebody fiddling around with their air pack straps in a high stress environment, a life or death situation? Hopefully it goes smoothly because they train on it. But I'd rather have someone that can get through a hole without taking their pack off and get everybody through that hole in a timely fashion to an area of refuge. It's just one of these things that, like I said it before, company officers, instructors, people building props, training officers, they have to have a little bit of imagination when they're developing their props or customizing the props that they buy.
And that imagination has to extend to the students in a way that You're not asking them to pretend. All right, so you got to get inventive as the instructor or as the officer in charge of the training for the evening or whatever it is. You can't walk up and go, okay, everybody pretend that there's drywall in front of these studs. No, that's not training. You
Yeah.
got to actually put the drywall on there. If you can't use the drywall, find something else. Maybe that's not the prop to do for tonight. And the biggest reason that we go down the road of having to put OSB up on the roof props, or we use pallets, it's time, right? If we
Time and
really, it's time and money. Yeah, absolutely. And 100% money. If we really, really, really want to deliver the best quality thing that's closest to the real thing, it would be build a real roof. You cut a hole in it, then you tear it all back down to the ground and build a new. Nobody's got that kind of time.
No.
What are we asking for? We don't have the Amish on standby in the corner going, hey, okay, boys, reset this thing. We're getting ready for Evolution 2 in 2 days. It's just impossible. So when you say make believe, yeah, you got to be really, really good at it. And with the roof prop, one of the things that I was up inside my attic, monkeying around with I was digging out a bunch of crap that was up there, was left from the previous owner. And I found there's packs of shingles up there. And I didn't think anything of it when I first noticed it. And then as we got working with that roof prop simulator, the one that's a trailer, I mentioned to one of the other guys to say, hey, you know what? I have all these freaking shingles. Why don't, instead of using all these pallets, if we're going to use these pallets, why don't we slap the OSB on? First of all, because they're just using pallets. They leave it up to the company that's running or that's hosting the drill tonight. They go, hey, company that wants to borrow the trailer, you just got to come up with their own pallets. Okay, so everybody goes and gets pallets. Well, now we're not even talking full coverage. We're talking about, slats on the top of the pallet. It's literally just a pallet sitting on the floor, just dropping on the roof. Great. Never seen that before. Okay, can we cut some OSB? OSB is going to cost money. Okay. Well, I got a couple packs of these things. So the first 10 companies that want to run through this, they're getting some good training, but I still got them sitting there. We're just waiting for the okay. And then one of the other guys I was talking goes, hey, you're never going to guess what, but I found a couple of packs of shingles in my shed. Sweet, bring them out, man. The time, right? It's the reset time. So we'd have to go out the night before or something and build, say 20 pallets with shingles on them, sheathing and shingles, so that we can just drop on, drop off, drop on, drop off. It's a lot of money if we didn't find this shit, this stuff buried essentially in our houses.
When we were training, when we were doing our live fire evolutions with early academies, and we were going out to the east side, the one training officer, he spent, I don't know how many hours or how many days the burn building had a vertical ventilation prop in it that you could actually cut and clear the hole, and he spent hours or days on each of the pallet inserts. He bought shingles, he bought tar paper, and instead of just OSB dropping in there, it was OSB with tar paper and shingles on them. So the recruits actually had a real roof to cut on, but it was still, they give them that target cut on, but at least they got some real feel to how the saw is going to react on a shingled roof.
Right, just turning it up one more notch.
Yeah,
and maybe day one of doing this stuff, because they're not going to do it just one hit and be done. So day one of doing some sort of ventilation, you start with the OSB. Okay, work them through there. Then you add in that, right? So now we've given them more reps with a little difference and working our way towards more and more realistic. It's still not realistic because you're not going to find a pallet on a roof, like you said.
It's that crawl, walk, run, sprint mentality to it.
So that's the three big, I think those aren't the three big ones. So that's your roof props, which we've kind of beat to death, our doors, our forcible entry doors, and our studs. The biggest thing I would think I would just want to leave out there is if you guys have these door props and these homemade stud props, find a way to mount them. All right, it makes a world of difference, especially when you get when you do add some sort of heavier duty locking mechanism on the forcible entry door. You start getting on there with either the doubled up Halligans, or you start throwing the cheater bar on there. All you end up doing is spinning the prop around. That's a whole nother thing. Find a way to pin it to the ground or put it out on the lawn, put some stakes down, do something so that you kind of challenge yourself. And with that, one more thing that you can add to is put something along the sides of them. So now it's, instead of the doorway that's just standing in the middle of the truck bay, it's now the doorway at the end of the hall. We see those apartment complexes and all that stuff, because now you're limiting, still the same tools, right? We don't have to invest in any other tools. But all it takes is I can take two 33-gallon trash bins, right? They're all over the firehouse. All right. If they're not, they're out by the curb, right? Go get the totes, empty them out, fill them up with water, put them right next to the props. Now they're in your way. They create a physical barrier. And just keep rearranging things so that you keep challenging yourself. Same tools, different, changing up the environment. Okay, change back the environment, back to the standard. Now change up the tools, right? Same door. All we've done is keep changing a couple different components to prime our decision making when we get there, so it's all second nature. Like we were saying in the first podcast, that's where we're going.
I saw a great modification to a door prop where they actually put the door prop and then they put stairs. So you had to climb upstairs to a platform and then climb downstairs to the door prop. So the door prop was essentially at the bottom of the stairs. And it's something we did at our firehouse. I don't know if you remember when the door was, we shifted the door over to the stairs to our mezzanine.
Yes.
So you had to kind of crawl through the stairwell banister to get into where the door was. But then you're restricted because you had a block wall on one side, and then you had the mezzanine, you had the staircase banisters on the other side. So you only had that 36-inch width to work the force entry door. So, and you're going to come across that. We have, there's apartments on the north side of town where the main entrance is the back door to these apartment buildings, and the main entrance is down a set of stairs, and you're forcing these doors in a 4x4 area.
Oh, and it's 90 degrees to the stairs.
It's a 90-degree turn from the stairs. Yep. Those are out there. They're out there in every community. What if, you get out in the rural area and you hit Bilco doors, you have to force entry into the basement door from the Bilco doors. That potentially can happen, I don't think I locked my basement door that's underneath the Bilco doors, because the Bilco doors are locked, but
those are super easy to get through.
Yeah.
And mine's just it's glass windows. I shouldn't be saying this out there, but glass windows, and then it's just a push button in the lock, right?
Yeah.
If you jiggle it hard enough, it just opens. So.
Yeah.
And I have lots of attack dogs, so don't try and get in. So those are some 3 good hits. Now on to the big one, right? The biggest prop that we got out there, and that is the burn building.
It's the most expensive one too.
It's the most expensive one. It's tough. Each one of these things, as we're starting to see, okay, we got time limitations. All right, time and training. So how much time do we have at drill, or how much time do we have for evolutions? Time to reset the drills. And then we have the monetary value. How much is it worth it to buy the prop in the first place, or put this thing up, to run it, to pay for the electric, the gas, whatever the consumables are, the upkeep, and then paying for the regular stuff, guys that come out, if it's career guys, it comes down to time and money is the big thing. And then we got the other big elephant out there, that's, what are the rules?
Right.
Because of these limitations, we get stuck in the same thing. We can have a couple floors, 1, 2, 3 floors, but at the lowest end of this thing, we got one burn room on every floor. And we all know where that is, because we've run it over and over and over and over again.
Right. And you've been in those if it's a building that you train in regularly, where the burn, the stretches up the stairs to, I'm going to go 50 feet to the right. I got to make a 90-degree turn, and then the door's right there. That's where the fire is going to be every time. And are we doing a disservice to our members, or the fire department, or the fire service, with burn buildings? I'll say it. I think at least doing live fire evolutions has started to become a waste of time for the fire service. And I will preference it by saying, depending on how you run your evolutions, I've seen them for, the static hose lines where they're just on the ground. Company comes in, they pull the hose lines in, they put the fire out, they back the hose lines out, and they set them down right at the front door again.
Oh God, I can't. Stop. You're giving me the odds. I
That
cannot stand.
well, then you
I
step well
cannot
then
stand when companies do that.
well then you
they
step it
pull
up.
up.
It,
Oh
well
God.
then well at least then they step it up a level where I've seen where the trucks are static and the fireman will pull the hose from the truck to actually do the stretch to the door. They'll stretch in, put the fire out, and then they repack the hose. And then the next evolution, they stretch off the truck is the exact same spot. They stretch off the truck and whatever. And then they can step it up a notch with having the trucks actually respond to the scene and set up where they think they should set up and have the crews get off, pull the lines to the front door and stretch and put the fire out. But I know this is controversial. I think doing live fire evolutions is a waste of time. And we'll talk about it in academy setting where you have a captive audience from 8 a.m. or whatever time your academy starts till 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and working an hour lunch, however long your lunch break is for your recruits. How many burns are you getting in at a fast pace? If you're working hard, you might 7
or 8. Yeah.
7 or
with
8.
Quick half-hour lunch or rotate crews for their half hour.
Right. And then when are we usually doing, if you run a spring academy, live fires are in summer. So now you got to worry about the work rest periods. If you're doing academy in the fall, your live fire is in November-ish time frame. It's probably still mild out because we don't get winters anymore. But the point is, you get 7 evolutions in. The fires that we're setting, they're not realistic. The smoke conditions are not realistic. Even using theater smoke with the Class A smoke, flashlights can penetrate the smoke and you can see where you're going. And how many times do you see? And this is a huge pet peeve of mine when we put instructors.
You just put it up there too. On the you're talking about the flashlights?
The flashlights.
Oh, you put that up there on the Instagram face-based thing.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing. You can use flashlights in these buildings, and you can quote unquote see through the smoke, and that breeds a whole nother issue. A training scar is you watch instructors that we team up that are supposed to be the company officers of the recruits going in, as if they're the engine company, the truck company, or whatever their duties are assigned, and the instructors are walking around and they're not crawling with their students, and they're walking around with a flashlight, or they got the thermal imager up to their face, and all they're doing is observing the recruits operate. These recruits have been in a fire academy, by the time they hit live fire, the live fire evolutions, 10 weeks. They have 10 weeks of
one was 13, yeah.
Right. They have minimal amount of fire experience, and you're going in as a quote unquote company officer of those recruits, and you're not acting as the company officer. You're just walking around and following them. You're not acting as a company officer doing what you're supposed to be doing. So that breeds a training scar. Now the recruits see the instructor or the company officers walking around because there's no heat in these buildings. You can't get them hot enough because they're so well ventilated. The fire sets are so small that, even if you use the theater smoke, once the theater smoke gets close enough to that burn room, the theater smoke burns off so you can still see. So the conditions are far from realistic as imaginable. And then the fire goes out. Now you have to do a full reset, full cleanup. Now, if you have a burn building that has multiple rooms, it might be a little bit more efficient because you might have a fire set built in one room. You do that fire, and you already have a fire set built in another room, so it's a little bit quicker turnaround for the evolutions. But if you have a smaller department, some of these smaller burn buildings, like the Valley department to the west of us, They have one burn room. They have a 3-story tower with one burn room. So every time they set a fire, they got to completely rebuild it. They got to muck it out. They got to do everything else. That takes time. Then the reason why you're only getting maybe 7 evolutions, if you're good 8, because now you got to leave another hour at the end of the day to muck the building out and clean it up. Conversely, if you use a propane building, that's even less realistic because it's a propane fire. The instructor that's running the prop on the computer or whatever system you use to run the propane prop, they're the ones that are lighting the fire. The timers never work properly, so even if they're spraying water properly, the fire never goes out like it would. And you can hit the button, get roll over and stuff like this, but the smoke that's in there, even the combination of the mineral smoke and the theater smoke, it's thick, but you can still see through it with a flashlight. It burns off, and it hit me when we had a fire earlier this year, and the probie came out and he goes, that is nothing like I was going to expect a fire to be based off of the fires that we had in the fire academy. He goes, it was unbearably hot and I couldn't see anything. Every fire we had in the fire academy for his recruit class, there were hot fires in the fire room, but you could walk around that building, and not feel any heat, depending on where you were. And if we want to create realistic, it's almost like, what do you want to accomplish when you go to a burn building? Do you want to accomplish stretching hose? Do you want to accomplish conducting searches? Do you want to accomplish, we're mimicking, this is a fire in a bedroom and we want to stretch a hose and we'll conduct searches. That can all be done without live fire. Now, I do think going to live fire training is fun. I'll go take classes and do live fire training because it's fun to do, especially if I don't got to clean it up and worry about that. If I go as a student, yeah, it's fun. But is it realistic, and are we really accomplishing anything? Because of the restrictions that are set forth by governing bodies in the fire service because of safety. And I'm not downplaying safety. Safety's paramount. But I think if we want to stretch hose lines in a blacked out environment or a zero visibility environment, just don't use smoke and put the BA shields over their faces or put the press and seal over their faces and shut the lights off and do like what you were talking about the other night. Put a flashlight with a cone in and just say, this is where the fire is. Find the fire and stretch to the fire room and put the fire out. Am I off by saying, what are we accomplishing by putting 2 pallets and a bale of hay out? Nothing, in my mind.
That with burn buildings, okay, so you're kind of referencing the Class A burn buildings there with the hay and pallets. And where we are in New York State, there's a certain poundage of fuel that you can use. Roughly, it comes out to 2 pallets and 1.5 bales of hay. That's it for a certain size, for your typical burn building fire room. So that's for one set. All right, you can do these things, run them as many as you want. However, now that pulls in, you have to have a burn plan. The burn plan is very specific. You will go in this door. You will exit out this door. If it's not the same, it doesn't leave. It's tough with all the rules now that it doesn't leave you the availability to think outside the box or as an instructor, change something, have it, oh no, your hose line is breaking down. Now what do? You have to, they can't make that decision because they already have to know that the hose line is going to be broken down or failure at the hose line, if you will. They need to know that before going in because it's a danger, it's a hazard. We can't have that. It's against the rules. So it's kind of like, oh man. And I was just talking with one of the city guys here. He was actually one of the instructors in my academy. I brought up, I'm like, man, do you remember there were 2 scenarios for scenario day. One of them, we wheel up. In other words, we're in the rig, we're around the corner, we pull up, and we have to make decisions. We used to have to make decisions based off what we saw. Has a single company arriving, or maybe they dispatch 2 companies. And one of them was, you just got to get in there, right? It was just, it got smoke showing, Alpha Bravo corner, second story. Somebody had to get off, do a 360. We start stretching a line, and we go in there. And just when the company all kind of got inside the building, he came up and stabbed and tore the hose line. Now this is quite a few years back. This is about 8 years ago, 9 years ago now. And it was, you had to recognize that while you're in there and you have the valve open, that you're having hose line failure and work through those problems. Today, you can't do that because the rules have changed. And to kind of add to that, there were old hoses, so they had a ton of them. Departments would donate them for this stuff. We didn't know in the moment, but we had to make those decisions. What do we do? Do we back out and just quick grab another line and stretch it in, or do we add on? Do we drop that section, add another one on, because it was the one right behind the nozzle? And he's like, yeah, it's the rules have changed, so I haven't been there since. And I'm like, oh man, because here's a guy that was thinking outside the box all the time, and now he's not there, driven away because of the rules. And I'm not saying, I don't want to really get down on the rule path. The point is, what they were trying to show in that scenario wasn't so much about the live fire, and this is to your point, is they wanted you to understand what was going on, right? Take in the whole thing, get your scene size up, take it all in, make your decisions. With the limited amount at this, whatever it was, week 10 and week 11, with the limited amount of knowledge that they installed thus far, you have to make decisions.
Right.
You can't play those two things together when there is actual fire inside that building anymore. So, okay, theater smoke it. Well, theater smoke kind of takes away that, because it just fills the space. It's just volume, right? It just fills the whole space. It doesn't have heat and all that other stuff.
Well, that exact evolution that you just said, you could do it. Just don't light the fire.
Just don't light fire.
You can do a ton of other things with that burn building if you don't light a fire. There's the rescues you can do, the hose stretches you can do, the like you just said, troubleshooting your hose line, you can do that. There's a lot of other options you can do as long as you don't light that fire. And I think that is better training than just going in and having your firemen get salty helmets from pallets and hay. Because really, some of the younger firemen, that's all they're looking for, in my opinion, is getting that soot on their helmet. And it's like, great, you got hay soot on your helmet. But if you don't light that fire, you can do that hose line evolution that you just did. You can do some different types of rescues that you can't do with live fire. You can, you don't have to worry about the cleanup at the end of the day. You don't have to worry about the decon that everybody's worried about now. How they're doing full decon of the firemen after live fire evolutions. Now thankfully, because a paid department, we have spare gear. So we'll bring our spare gear out for live fire, because we know when we're done with live fire, we have to get decon, and now that our spare gear is soaking wet, then we take it back and fully decon it in the gear washer. Does your volunteer department that you're in, do you guys have spare gear?
Officially, no. There's some guys that have some old sets that may fit them, so they kind of exchange and quick throw it in the wash. But it's at the end of a night, so they throw it in there, or we try to rotate it around. The point you're making, though, is still there and valid, that not everybody's stuff gets clean right after the fire. And it might be another week to get everybody clean.
Right. When I was a volunteer here at the department we work at, the only spare gear that they issued us was pants, bunker pants. And so if the decon policies weren't in place when I was volunteering here 20 years ago, but now if a volunteer, and our volunteers here, the couple that we do have, they still don't have a full set of spare gear. They go do live fire and they get deconned. Their gear is out of service until it's dry and washed. So now if we get a fire that night or a job that night, they're not coming. At least on the career side of the house, we have a full set of spare gear. So when we do have live fire training, we could use our spare gear, and then we have our main set of gear for the rest of the shift that we're working. I don't know many volunteer departments that give their volunteers a full set of spare gear. And
no, but I'm sure there's grants out there and stuff. I know there's charity organization and grants. It's a lot of work. And if you screw up one line in these grants, you might not get it. So I do sympathize with that. And it also, maybe you miss the boat once, kind of puts you off. So I understand that as well. It's a lot of work,
but
for especially small shops.
I mean, right there. I mean, if you're adhering to the whole cancer prevention, and you're deconning your gear properly, your gear is pretty much out of service until it's cleaned and dry. And if you do live fire and you don't have a spare set of gear, you're gonna miss out on calls if the call comes in that night because you don't have gear. So, and that's just another reason why I think it's a waste of time to do this live fire training. Is it? I'm gonna keep saying, is it fun to do? Yeah, it's fun to do. It's fun to do. You're still fighting fire, but is it really accomplishing the tasks that we wanted to accomplish?
Is it priming our decision making?
Right.
At the smallest level, the company level, or the individual.
Right, and if you go back to the prime decision making, your burn building, the burn buildings we train on here, that and there's how many we want. There's probably a handful of burn buildings in our county that we've regularly trained on. Where all the rooms are. First of all, because besides the bigger one and the one at the county facility, all the other smaller ones are almost the exact same layout. The one on the far east side, the one up north, and the one on the east side, but not as far away, where a couple guys volunteer. It is the exact same building. Center stairs. You go up to the left. Depending on they might be mirrored images, so they might not be. You go up and to the right. You still go up and to the left, but the layout is exactly the same because they all buy from the same company. Now, if you do the Conex containers, you have a little bit more. You can do a little bit more customization, and it's a little bit cheaper.
I'm just going to get into this because you can have anything from a freaking city built out of these things down to small 2-3, Conex containers.
Yeah, and what's nice about the Conex containers is the container that you use for the burn area. You burn in it for a year, 2 years, or however many burns you get in it, and once the container's shot, you send it to the scrapyard and you buy another one for $5,000 instead of relining a whole new burn build. Paginite and the new stuff that they put, that new the corrugated metal with the insulation on the inside, that stuff's not cheap. It is not cheap at all. And $5,000 used Conex container is a little bit better investment, plus the scrap metal you get when you send it away to the metal scrapyard.
So what we're learning at my county job, we purchased one of these, and very reputable company. They came in, they had a design engineer come in, figure out where we could put it. The foundation, not foundation like basement foundation, but small squares, foundational squares that they had to put around in order for this thing to sit perfect. And then it turned out there's an issue because we live in the Northeast, snow load. So now there's a rating that's got to go with this as these things connect up as if it is a building. And it sits two Conex containers parallel side by side on the ground. And on one of them sits a third one. Okay. And they're pinned together. So the two bottom ones are side by side. There's a doorway that goes between them. The one that stands alone, there's nothing above it. That has at the end of the hallway a big burn at one of it end, that's where you put a burn room, if you will, but it's open. You can close these like small half doors if you think about it. It's not quite the top half of a Dutch door. It's a little bit shorter, but it hangs at the ceiling just so
Yeah.
that it can build up smoke, layer it, and let it trickle under. Or you can leave them open, right? And it's pretty cool in concept because you can now have a flow of heat throughout this building depending on how you open and shut different vents, windows, etc. You also get that feeling that wherever you decide to put somebody at an entrance and say, okay, go in, go find it, right? You still got windows, so you're doing your 360 and you should get a good understanding, right? This is great for our IC people or first arriving officers. It's great for the company that as they first get in there, whether it's let's say a search company gets in there, where am I going? It's not like I see a door at the end of the hallway, I'm going to go in there and I have a big glow. I have a big, massive fire, right? You're feeling heat. You're trying to discern what's going on inside this building. And it's kind of a rat maze. And you can keep changing up the walls even inside of the Connex container itself. On the second floor, so now the next one over and then one up. So there's a stairwell that's in there. There's actually a way to get outside on the roof of the standalone. So you can even do that as you walk up a veranda onto into it and kind of treat it as a basement fire coming down to the first one if you wanted to. Not a big fan of those types of things, but whatever, it's still there. But what's nice on that second, let's say it's the second story one, at the end of it, there's actually a door, like as if it's a bedroom door. And inside that, it is a closable seal off. You can seal off a burn room. So now, and this is, man, when I first started going through the training with this, it was like I think it was 16 or 20 hours straight for a weekend. And it actually might have been 3 days. I can't remember now. It was a lot of fun. Guy came in. He's actually a battalion chief out of New Brunswick, I think it was. You can do the math and figure out who that is. But anyways, he came up and my gears are turning. I'm like, man, if we had one of these up here, where we work, oh my God, we could do a CAN course. But the people that bought this and the people that will be using this, they're so used to, you go in the entrance door, right? And it's just not crappy. It's a severely used forcible entry door. You go in, you make a right, you make a left, you go into the room and you put out the fire, right? That's what we're used to of a Class A building. Yeah. And there's kind of that happens. That's bread and butter for all over the county. But as Connex container, you have to find that room. Now it depends on how you want to set it up. What's the conditions you're looking for? Because if I'm setting this up as if it's a bedroom fire that's it's not quite into its full potential, right? It's just growing. So it's almost smothering itself out because they closed the door. I can make that. If I want it so that when they get to that door and they crack it open and now it lights and the fingers lick over the guys going up there. And then they shut the door, control it, and go, hey, call for a line if it's a search crew, or maybe it's just a handline crew, and depends on the conditions. Are we a handline crew going in there to find the fire, or is this a search company coming upon the fire? Is this just a CAN confidence course type of thing?
Yeah.
I have all sorts of different ways to control the environment. Now, I'm not saying that this is better. This is just different, and I can fine tune that environment instead of what it is we're just doing, right? Are we just pulling hose lines for the night? Are we just searching for the night? Are we just ventilating for the night? And you and I think, had this conversation we kind of got into it on the first episode, but we break things up so much and hammer on them. And again, time permittance, it might be a while before we come back together and put all these puzzle pieces back together, see the big picture, so that we know how to operate as multiple companies on the same fire ground. Plus the same people showing up for drill or on the same shift, whatever. It's just a really, really cool prop because it's new to us. It changes the environment. It's got a lot of cool features to it. Now, the reason why I am so stoked about that is that, like I said, our Class A buildings, it's the same thing. We go in there. When you get to that fire room, it's right, hay and pallets. And everybody likes to see big fire. Big freaking ball of fire sitting in the corner, and it's it's on the rack or whatever it is sitting on the ground. Well, when you go into a building, especially these newer homes, by new I mean the last 20 years, these things are sealed up. They might be built like on a matchsticks, but they're sealed. So if you get a compartmentalized fire and you reach that fire room, it's going to be banked pretty much, the smoke's going to be banked
Yeah.
down to the floor or damn near to the floor. And it's going to get to the point where it's starting to snuff itself out. That when you open that door, you might not actually see flame. You might not even see a glow because it's so thick, right?
Right.
And maybe you just introduce enough oxygen that it lifts up a little bit. And then maybe we start to see a little glow because now we're giving it some, it's reigniting, or not reigniting, but it's growing. We're reoxygenating that fire. Well, then the next stage is it's getting hotter all of a sudden. Now it needs, that off gassing is going to need to burn, right? That's something more realistic we should be trying to obtain in our training environments. But it's hard to do that in Class A.
Yeah, we were accomplishing better fire sets with those boxes that we were building. Do you remember
remind me, which boxes?
So they would take a pallet, and then they would stack. A pallet would be on the base, so it had airflow underneath. And then they would take 4 more pallets and build a box, and then sheathe it with OSB, stuff the box with hay.
Oh, yeah.
And then the top piece of OSB would be able to slide to create like a chimney. Mm-hmm. And you could get really sooty fires that way with, good smoke. It wasn't black smoke because it's still Class A material, but can't do that anymore. The other thing is
fuel loading and material wise.
The fuel loading and material. And you talked about the doors in that new building. So let me ask you, in the fire set rooms, do the doors open outward or do they open inward?
Very good. The bedroom one swings at you. It doesn't swing in like as if you're going into a bedroom.
Go back to
I don't think.
If you go to your recognition prime decision making, what bedroom door in America swings outward towards you?
Good point.
None. So we have these Class A buildings because of the rules that they have to be built in, because they have to be an exit door where the burn room is. They swing out towards us. So when they swing out towards you, depending, it could hinder the hose line stretch, or it actually makes the hose line stretch a lot, or not the hose line. The hose line stretch is going to be, it is what it is. But there was a fire a couple years ago where when we opened the door, the fire started in the closet, and the closet was behind the door. So when we opened the door, we were able to get it with the can, but then when the hose line came in, the hose line had to stretch past the door. Then we had to close the door a little bit so they could make the full 180 degrees to finish off the fire that was in the closet. You don't get that in a burn building because the doors open out into the hallway, which once again is it's going to be a training scar. If you've taken a fireman luckily we get a lot of firemen that come to the career side that have been volleys or are volleys in other departments. So they come in with some experience. Maybe they've caught a couple fires in their volley department, but our county has been hiring at such a fast pace that we're getting firemen on the civil service, or we're getting names on the civil service list that have zero experience. They're coming from, they're never been a fireman anywhere. They're not coming from a line of firemen, so they have zero experience, and they go into these burn buildings, and their first door that they encounter where the fire is, the doors open up towards them, and that's not how it is in a house. Now, luckily, in the Class B burn building that we have in our county, because it's a Class B building, the doors can open inward like a normal house. So it's a little bit more realistic. But the problem with the Class B building, it's a propane fire. It doesn't act like a normal fire.
Yeah. So kind of really quick to circle around that. So rules, right? Rules dictate that the door's got to be in the right position depending on its class. And then you just mentioned, hey, like our county is hiring like crazy over the last, I got hired 7 or 8 years ago, almost 8 years ago, I think, at this current job. And since then, it boomed thereafter. You know, it was like 2 guys got hired when I got hired. Now we're hiring like 6 at a time. And it's not just us, it's everybody around us.
Yeah.
The reason for that isn't just because, oh, we got a few retirements, or a lot of people are retiring at once. It's because of those rules. So there is the other side of these rules are saying, hey, you know, because of the conditions that everything's being built, you know, fires don't, they progress rapidly. It's not taking half hour for this thing to progress. It's taking 3 minutes. You need to throw a lot of people at this. You know, the need suddenly arises. So the rules start to change. And part of those rules are, I want to say, helping us to progress only because it requires more people. Ultimately, it just means more work, right?
Yeah,
so the other side of the rules are working for us. The downside is our training can sometimes not be the best because of those same rules.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the rules that we had to abide by are very beneficial for a lot of things. They've done a lot of good for the safety of the firemen.
That's exactly it. It all is leveling the playing field. Where is the safest for everybody? Caveat to that is it always goes down to the smallest place. So the ones that have low frequency, whatever, we have to, that's where it's got to get catered to. So it's got to be the safest for them, which means that the ones that are at the top end of the spectrum also have to be pulled down. And it's not, man, it's tough to say that out loud because I don't mean that in a demeaning way. It's just, you know, everybody's not equal as far as departments go and everything, right? Your staffing models, your departments. One that's a tertiary town is not going to be the same as a big city, you know, but yet they both have to play by the same set of rules. And that's just wildly different, you know, urban, suburban versus straight up urban or rural suburban, you know, like, man, that's very different.
Which sucks because a fire in a farmhouse in the middle of rural America,
it's not the same as a high rise.
It's not the same as a high rise, but it's still going to burn the same as a 2.5 story, you know, balloon frame construction in a urban area. The fire is burning the same. The difference is that what's the response time, the manpower, and everything else.
Sure. But now it comes down to those, you know, the playing cards or the Rolodex, you know, how much do we have experience based and through training to recognize, hey, I've seen this experience a handful of times. That's how I'm going to play this one out because it matches with this card. Right. You know, that's literally, or this slide, as you mentioned. With the Class A buildings, when you have that, you go in, you make a right, you make a left, you go to the burn room, and you put out the fire. The biggest drawback to that is because the hay and pallets. The first round, you might get some banking smoke, only if you're able to really seal up that room before the company or the handline crew gets there, right? But once it becomes a warm room, there's zero movement or instructors moving in and out to keep feeding it or whatever. It becomes just a ball of fire in the corner and clear visibility.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got that condition set. The second is when the company gets in there, especially because of the said rules, you know, you have to go in, you have to make a right, you have to make a left, right? Any deviation, it's bad against the fire plan, don't do it, right? So we'll put that aside for a second, but they get in there, they drive in, they get to the room. As soon as they open up, they go, I got the fire room. And then you see them crack the bell and they spray it down. Right? Okay, well, you do that 2 nights a summer. Maybe you do it 10 times a summer. Maybe you've done it 10 times a summer for the last, maybe you got a good veteran that's been doing it for 15 years. They know where that burn room is, and they've played out the same thing over and over and over again. So now when different instructors, and like I'm fairly new to the game and at my county job, when I see that, I go, well, what if there's a victim in that room? You know, so I put a dummy in the room, you know, right by the door. See if they recognize that, right? It's a different thing in their conditioning, right? That's, oh, now what do I do? Well, do they have that in their Rolodex? Have they had that? Let's start putting it in their Rolodex. Let's give that to them. Okay, because who's going to be in that bedroom that's on fire? Or who's going to be just outside that bedroom that's on fire? I want you to recognize, hey, you're going to probably run into a victim. Don't forget why we're there. Are you searching that room? How bad is that room? And you have to decide, is that room bad enough that I'm not going to search it? Or is it, it's just in the corner. Maybe I'll get a quick sweep. Then I'll push, you know, throw a ton of water on it. So I've seen over and over again, and it's good departments, ones that have a little bit more winter rust on them than others. They get in there, they immediately dump the water right on the fire, and then they what do you call hydraulically ventilate, hydraulic ventilation, and they just do
Yeah.
it rapid progression, and it's like, man, okay, so for the second, third evolution, you just throw a victim in there, and I had one a couple weeks back, awesome crew. First of all, this department they're very, very good, but they had they fell for it. So I'm standing up on. They only want to do second floor burns, and I'm up on the second floor watching them. And we didn't have to actually instruct; we just sort of had to facilitate. So they get up there. The hand line stretches to the second floor. They start making their way down the hallway. Lights are on, which drives me nuts. All the lights are on. The freaking ones on the helmets. They're the ones on the chest. They got man. It looked like semi trucks coming down this thing. They're coming down the hallway. They pass one room, go straight to the fire room, and in dump water. So the first company that did it, they go, hey, I got the fire room. I got water on the fire. Okay, they start putting it out, then hydraulically ventilate. The second crew, they came up, went past that first room again, right past it, and they were still 20 feet from the fire room, and they already called out to their commander, which awesome communications, by the way. They actually had very, very good communications. They had a search company going, a little flip-flopped on that part, but that's all right. They're working on it. They called out that they are at the fire room 20 feet before they were actually at the fire room because they knew where the fire room was. And as soon as they got it, okay, so now they opened up the door, and the guy in the nozzle even said, I got a victim in the fire. I got a victim. He's in the fire room. He's in the fire room. And immediately opened the valve. Okay.
And the victim.
Yeah, I've had this conversation with a few different departments over the last year and a half. Oh, well, if there's that much fire in there, it's probably not tenable. All right, you've articulated that. I'll accept that. If you can make that understanding, you visualized this, so I made a decision based off of what was presented to me. That's my outcome, and that's what I'm going to go with.
In Florida.
Yeah, that's okay, but it was literally within hand's reach. So why not just reach in, grab it, pull it out, pass off to the guy, second on the line, third on the line, or whatever. Just pull them in the hallway, then dump water. But they only did it, and this was like a 10, 12-year veteran. So I was surprised. They recognized. They even they were down low, took a quick sweep, victim, dumped water. Because that's what they've been doing for the last 10, 12 years. Yeah. Over and over and over again. Same room, same floor. Everything's been the same. And then did as they're hydraulically ventilate, then the second guy came up, went in, got the victim, and then radioed out, hey, we've got the victim. We're coming out the A side of the building on the first floor. Like, okay, back to communications. Communications are awesome. It's your step in timing. Even if there's a 90% chance, if there's a 10% chance, they now have a 0%. Right. If it's untenable conditions, yes. If you can articulate that's completely untenable, okay, that's fine. The point of it was to try and see if they would recognize it, make a change in their plan, right? Hold off on opening that valve just for a quick second, snag that victim. Now let's get that fire out. Not bad. We had a talk afterwards, and, all things good. So then came the last evolution. I'm like, man, these guys, they're calling it out. 20 feet from the room. I'm at the fire room because that's the fire room. And I'm not the first. I know I'm not the first person to think of this, and I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other things I could have done to actually make this better. But in the moment, I always carry the box light. Even as an instructor, it doesn't matter if I'm an instructor or I'm in the back seat. I always carry a box light just because it's easier to search with. And it's never on until I actually need it. I don't walk around the buildings with these things on because it's like driving down the expressway doing 90. We say 90 on the 90 through a snowstorm, and you got your high beams on. It's like going hyperspace, or hyperspeed, and from Star Wars. You can't see anything, and that's what it's like having a box. Anyways, I noticed that first room that they kept skipping, nobody was searching it. So I stuffed hay under the door for the fire room, so it kind of, you couldn't peek, you couldn't see the glow, and I just jammed the box light in a cone. Opened up the door, that first door, and kind of put it in the corner-ish under the door so you saw glow coming under the door and through the crack and everything, and then cranked up the fog machine because we had a fog machine going as well. So it was super low visibility, and when that fog gets going, it really kind of, now that orange glow not magnifying, but it's dispersing in a weird way.
Right.
So I'm like, hopefully this worked. And the next crew that came in, I got the fire room, and they dumped into the wrong room. And they, they were laughing and joking about it afterwards. Like, oh man, they got us good. We made a cool scenario out of it with just changing it, using freaking a light and a cone. It's not the most perfect thing in the world. So it was just one quick thing we came up with. We ran with it, and they went, all right. They even identify themselves. We got used to the fire room, searching for that fire room, working through your call outs, because where that's going to come into play is when you actually have a fire. It's not going to be in the same position. It's not on the second floor and the second door down the hall. Where is it? Do you know how to stretch for it? Do you know how to search for it? Are you preparing for it? And what happens when you open that bedroom door if it's not already open? Are you just going to dump water in there and then go straight to hydraulically ventilate? Because then the next pet peeve of this thing is when you go straight to hydraulically ventilate, because that's what we've done. One burn set, one burn room, over and over again, hydraulically ventilate. Did anybody check the rest of the floor first?
Yeah.
Did anybody check for fire in any other floor?
Above.
Because or above. Are we just creating a giant fan and progressing the other fire we haven't found?
Yeah.
These are things that we need to consider. And so when you're defeating that prop that is the burn room over and over again, whether it's Class B or it's Class A or whatever else you got, are you going through those steps that's really making you think, hey, is this the right step yet? All right, have I found all the fire to start ventilating? We talked about vertical ventilation and horizontal ventilation. We talked mostly about vertical ventilation. You really got to pay attention to what else you're doing, right? Yes, you're helping the hand line out, but if you're doing it hydraulically ventilate, just because you think you put out all the fire, that's only the burn room.
Right.
It's just one room. What about the rest of the building? Are you adding to that too?
I can't remember a fire I've been at where we knocked down what we deemed as the fire room, like if it was a bedroom fire or whatever, where we knocked it down, said, and put the communication over, yeah, fire's knocked down, we're going to start hydraulically ventilating. No, because we've knocked the fire down, and the next thing is always we're checking for extension. And you can't check for extension in a burn room. There's no extension to check for in a burn building. You can't open up walls. You can't open up baseboards. You can't open up ceilings. There's some great props out there for ceiling fires I've seen.
Yes.
But
where you clear the studs, you pull the drywall down, you clear the studs, and you actually stuff hay up in those little bales.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're going back to the rules. Just because we lit something on fire, we have to have a certain fuel load and all this other stuff. So now I'm kind of like, man, it takes away an important step. The next important step is, like you're saying, check for extension, overhaul, if you will. Shit, we can't do it because we're adding more fuel.
Yeah, I'm smiling over here because you mentioned, you changed up one little thing in the burn room and it messed up everybody, because for 15 years they've been, going up the stairs, making a right-hand turn, going through a doorway, and there's the fire. And I'm smiling because I did we have the maze in the basement of one of our firehouses, and that maze has been there 20, 30 years, it's probably been there 30 years. And the maze has been the same. So we got guys that have gone through this maze their entire career. They were volleys maybe 15 years, and then they got on the job, and they've been on the job for 20 years now. So they've got 30 years of going through this maze, and it's never changed. So they could go through it sleeping. They could sleepwalk through it.
These last 4 years, it has changed every season.
Right. Well, as one of the first things I did as a training officer, I didn't do anything. I didn't change the layout of the maze at all. I just would add a wire somewhere. Or, I don't know if you noticed, I put that end table in the corner where there was never an end table before. I had guys crawling underneath the end table because they had no clue where they were, because I put a piece of furniture in a corner where it's never been there in the past 10 years. Or I put a mattress somewhere where there's never been a mattress before. And now it creates it messes with their mind at that point, because they're so used to, all right, I go down the porthole, I get on a right-hand search, I'm going to go up a set of stairs, I'm going to go make 180 degrees, and I'm going to go down a set of stairs, and then I'm going to go through a doorway, and then up a ramp, and then I'm going to go up in this area, then I'm going to go down a ramp. All we did, there's no way to change the layout of the maze because it's built there. It's been there forever. There's not much room to change it. So all we could do was add little things inside the maze that wasn't there before to create a difference and be like, oh, this piece of board. At one point there was just I remember there was a 2x4 that I just put on an angle across the hallway, and they're like, this isn't supposed to be here. Well, it's there now. There was putting a mattress somewhere. They're like, what's this mattress doing here? I don't know. It's there now, to work around it. And there was guys that are seasoned firemen, 20 years on the job, that have gone through this maze their entire career every year, because we do the maze every February, and they're getting turned around in a training prop that they've been using for 20 years. And you just make little finite changes and it makes it a little bit better. And then all you do is you just move, all right, you take that piece out and you put something else somewhere else, and it creates it makes the maze a whole different environment. And we go down the rabbit hole.
Some of it's driven by the rule sets as well. Now everything's got to be able to, somebody starts getting stuck, panic, anxiety, whatever it is, really, really getting stuck where, okay, now we might actually have a medical problem. We have to be able to quick open that up and yank them out. Right. Yeah. So now when you have like all the little levels, like we used to have it, actually it's still in there. It's blocked off. Yeah, remember you used to be able to get underneath the entire maze. Like you were crawling on your belly. You had to it was really, really tight space, and you'd be moving around that. Man, what was it? 8-10 years ago when we were using that? That was our normal maze, because I volunteered here, but I volunteered at the department before I got hired, and because it is a combination department. So going through all that space, man, if we ever had a problem, which we never had a problem, so we never thought of it. There's no way to get those people out unless you actually do a real, fast scenario of some sort, a Rick scenario. Yeah, now you can't have that. So it's just blocked off. But nothing says we can't change some other features of things. So one of the things I'm really proud of, I forget who did it, but there's the stairs. You go up and down some of the stairs, and they created, instead of having a spongy stair, it actually has a pivot. So like a stair that broke away. So when you step on it, it broke away, but it's designed in a way that you cannot get a Chinese finger trap where a boot goes in it, passes through, and then now you're locked in there. You can't break an ankle on this thing. It's just enough. It's spring loaded. So you push on it, it breaks in half, and then it snaps back up. And you're like, oh, okay. But if you put your feet out wide to the stringers, you can totally maneuver up this thing. And it's just one stupid little thing trips people up. Like what the Jesus.
To hammer home the point of being wide on the steps. That's and you only do it once.
Yeah, that's it. Now you're going to be careful on every other stair, especially like you said, the guys that have been doing it for 15, 18 years now, the last few years, like, same old prop, and then they go in there, like the first stair they come to moves funny. The stairs never move. Well, now they're cautious about everything else. What else changed? No, probably nothing. Maybe something else.
Right.
Another cool thing I remember you guys doing too down there is taking the electrical boxes and just mounting them right to a wall in the middle of a straightaway. So as you're swinging up and down, all of a sudden your arm catches on this electrical box. It's dead. It's capped. There's nothing. Not even wires going to it.
Right. It's just a box screwed into the wall. Yeah. Well, my favorite thing was the wires props was always like, oh, just hang some rope so they can feel some rope. Well, what we did is we just took a lot of wire and loosely hung it. So you're going to feel it, and then you think you've passed it, but there's also 15 more feet of that same wire. So you think you're past it. Next thing you know, you've flung it over yourself. You think you've cleared it. And because there's so much wire and it's so very loosely hung, it just falls back on the guys. And if they didn't clear it right, and if they're not burying their bottle in the corner like they're supposed to be, and they're not swimming the way that we teach them to, if they do if they do that swim, they bury the bottle in the corner and they swim like we tell them to do, they clear it fine.
Yeah, no
But as soon
matter
as
how
they
scary it looks.
right, as soon as they don't do that, they're getting hung up.
Yeah, and
And
I got some plans to so I completely cleared that box and redid the whole thing where that's got that chute that's got all the wires, chains, and all that stuff. I have plans, I just need time, so before the next class rolls through, if it gets hosted here again or at our department again, um, to make it more where it's bundled wire, so it drops down, comes up, as if, drop ceiling fell
like
out.
server wires.
Yes, yeah, like server route. You know how it's all bundled together, but it's in a long
Yeah.
stretch and it bounces around. And then with one of them starts like hanging low. That way, as each person rolls through there and gets snagged on one, it starts yanking it out. And so it starts unbundling it almost.
Yeah.
And only because I've been listening to both the students that go through that, our people who have gone through that, and other departments that come here to, go to, I keep saying here, other departments that come over to our district to train in our props. They've all said, well, you guys have wire, chains, there's some blankets zip screwed in there just to create a slippery environment on the bottom. So it just throws the senses off. That's the purpose of it. They're like, if we recognize that, we would never be going through there. If we're searching for somebody, we wouldn't be going through there. If we're searching for an exit, okay, I can see that side. Why would you go through a bunch of wires? Nobody told you to. You would not put yourself into further risk. It's usually wires drop down on you. Now you're pinned.
Well, and that's the biggest thing.
The prop's designed to help you navigate those situations. Just that it's kind of like small little things all added together, and we call it the maze.
Right, and it used to be
understand what I mean?
It used to be called mass confidence. You build confidence while wearing your SCBA, and it must have got lost in translation or somewhere along the way, because even one of my most well-respected senior men that, he's retired now, he's like, if I ever come across a tube in a house, I'm not crawling through it. I said, yeah, I know. I go, and whoever has a 24-inch piece of corrugated water tube, sewer tube in their house, there's other issues you got to worry about. I go, the point of a maze is to induce stress on the person going through it and maneuver their air pack. So if and when they do encounter a drop ceiling in a collapsed environment, they've been in that scenario. That nothing in the maze is realistic. There's no, in a house fire, there's not a cheese at the end of the where the fire is, and you got to make your way towards the cheese like a rat in a maze. This is just, we're going to run you through it. We're going to make sure you can stay on a right-hand wall. We're going to put some obstacles in front of you. We're going to induce stress, a lot of stress. Now we've incorporated like fireground traffic through speakers to induce more stress. Sometimes, I was playing like heavy metal music, but some of the guys were like, oh, they actually calmed me down a little bit more. So it wasn't working the way I wanted it to. So
those are people you just kind of turn your head a little sideways and go, how did you get hired?
Right. But the maze isn't supposed to be realistic. And I think that's what company officers and instructors need to portray more to the guys that they're going through the maze. Yes, this isn't a realistic scenario. We're going to induce stress. You're going to maneuver your air pack. We want to maneuver your body. We're gonna knock off like 17 JPRs for survival and SCBA wearing. But the other sense is, God forbid someone is caught in a collapse, or God forbid, someone gets tangled up on a mattress spring, or or whatever the scenario, you have to go through a wall, or you're trapped, you become disoriented and trapped. You've been there. Now we go back to the recognition, prime decision making. You've got some sort of a slide in your head, like, I've been here before. I know what to do. Yes, it was in a maze in a controlled environment, but, wires have now collapsed on me. A drop ceiling's collapsed on me. I got server wires and Ethernet cords and, the wires that hang the drop ceiling on me. What do? I bury my bottle in the corner. I do the swim move that the instructors taught me to do. I call a mayday. I activate my pass alarm, and I get out. The other thing, and I can't stand it, and it's, yeah, is it annoying when a pass alarm goes off? Well, yes, it's loud, it's piercing, but that's what it's supposed to do. But how many times you see instructors in survival classes where, all right, they come across an obstacle, they call their mayday, they do it over the mayday, mayday, mayday. Yeah, go ahead with the mayday. Firefighter and so. I'm entangled in wires. I need someone to come. I don't know where I am. Whatever the case may be, and the instructor who's acting as the incident commander says, "Okay, firefighter so, activate your pass alarm, control your breathing. RIT team's on its way." The firefighter activates their pass alarm, and then because it's piercing and it's loud and it's annoying to hear, the instructor goes, "All right, turn your pass alarm off." They've done that all through the academy. They do that whenever you do your SCBA Mayday training. Then when it comes time to, God forbid, if someone ever is in a Mayday scenario and you go muscle memory now, I turn my pass alarm on and I turn my pass alarm off. It's one of those urban legends. I don't know if it's true. It's that the police officer that practiced however many times of disarming a perpetrator with a firearm. So that the bad guy's got the gun. He's pointing it at the police officer. The police officer does his disarming techniques, his Mel Gibson Lethal Weapon, disarms the guy. But then he's doing sets and reps. So he disarms the guy, hands the gun back. Disarms the guy, hands the gun back. Disarms the guy, hands the gun back. Does this over and over again throughout his whole career when they do disarming techniques. And like I said, this is I've never verified the story or if it's an urban legend. It's one of those stories that kind of drives a point across muscle memory. But the story goes is that this guy comes across someone that's pointing a firearm at him. The police officer disarms him, hands the gun back, and the bad guy shoots the police officer. Like I said, I don't know if it's a true story, but it's one of those stories that hammer home the point of muscle memory.
I've heard this one a few times myself too, and you're exactly right. I mean, this is the point of training. This is the RPD, not the police department. It is the recognition prime decision making at its finest. We also have to audit ourselves as instructors, as company officers, even as firemen. We have to audit what it is we're training. Okay, great. We did the reps. We did the evolution. High five. We do the old. Everybody, great job. Go home. We need to kind of do a quick tailboard, or at least not a full after action, formal or informal, but kind of go, okay, now how did that evolution play out, and kind of analyze a little bit, not too deep, but enough to go, oh crap, I handed the gun back. Is that going to come back to bite me in the butt?
Right.
What is that for the fire service? And for us, like you just said, it's that pass alarm. Somebody pointed that out a little over a year ago, and I never thought of it. And here we're churning people out and sending them out there in the world. I never considered that before. So now I put the earplugs in and I make them go through their obstacle until they decide, even if they got stuck, they go through, let's say they breach a wall, and then they go through, they do their escape, they get through the wall. They're don't touch that pass alarm. Keep going until they get free and realize, right? They got to control their breathing, then realize, hey, I got through that. Can I turn my pass alarm off? I don't know. Did you ask command?
Right.
Then they go back through the steps. Hey, you can cancel the RIT team. I'm already out of the building. I forgot to tell you. I don't care what it is, making a joke, but let them kind of drive that versus, leaning down, tapping on the shoulder. Okay, now turn your pass alarm off. We're good. Go on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to. That's one little thing. If that's the one little thing I start to add to the fire service, hey, okay, I did my job, but I don't want somebody to end up in a fire and calling a mayday and then turn it on, immediately turn it off. It's like, wait, did you guys hear something?
The other thing that pass alarm does during that evolution is it ramps up the stress level.
Creates more, right? Adding stressors.
Yeah. I mean, there's guys, boom, they hit the pass alarm fine, and then the instructor's like, all right, turn your pass alarm off, and then they go through the obstacle. It's like, no. Keep that pass alarm on. Now you have to deal with that piercing pass alarm going off in your ear while you're trying to mitigate this obstacle. And you can watch some guys go through it fine, they have no problem, and then there's some firemen that they go into vapor lock. They can't, and that's when you got to work through them and breathing techniques and everything else, and slow instruction with them. Maybe you have to take them out of the maze or whatever you have to do. Go through the obstacle without the mayday being called. Just, hey, we're going to teach you how to go through the obstacle. Then the next time, call the mayday and then go through the obstacle, and then ramp, just like we talked about the burn evolutions, ramp it up again. Go through, call the mayday, activate the pass alarm, maybe turn it off then. But then after they mastered the obstacle, then we go, okay, pass alarm stays on while you mitigate this obstacle. If you talk about, and this is off training, but go to, if you want to talk about same thing with pass alarm, something I do when I do my truck checks, or not truck checks, my SCBA checks, and when I first get in the shift, is I don't check my pack looking at it. When I get in the truck and I'm doing my SCBA check, I sit in the pack and I put the straps on. Because where's the pass alarm?
Right there on your right.
It's right where it should be, on the right-hand side. But if I get in the rig and I'm looking at the seat and I do it, look, a lot of guys do, they take the pack out, they turn the bottle on, they put the pack back in the seat, and they're still looking at it, and they put their mask on, they breathe it down, they hit their purge valve, they bleed it off, make sure the pass alarm goes off. But then where's the pass alarm when you're looking at the pack?
It's when you're staring at it? Yeah.
It's on the left-hand side. So when you do your truck checks in the morning, when you do your SCBA checks in the morning, tell the guys sit in your seat and do it. Because
that's a good point.
Your muscle memory, your SCBA check is done at the beginning of every shift, and your muscle memory is now my left hand is activating that pass alarm every time. Where if you sit in the seat and you wear your pack and you do your SCBA check, now your pass alarm's in your right hand, where it will always be. And that's how I check my pass.
Oh, I never see. There's another one. Somebody, now that you pointed out, I'm going to change that. I mean, you're thinking, oh, you idiot! You should be doing it anyways. Oh, I've been staring at the pack the whole time.
But that's not. That was
I pull it out. I check the bottle. I go through the rest of it as if I'm doing a normal inspection, not putting out, like how the JPR says. But if the JPR doesn't say, hey, there's a specific way this thing's got to sit on the table or on your back or in the back of a chair.
I think I picked that up probably 10 years ago. I want to say it was Billy Goldfeder, one of his lectures I sat through. He talked about it, and it was like the light bulb went off. I was like, yep, that makes 100% sense, and it was an easy fix, easy change. Sit in your seat and put your pack on.
Anything else on? Let's see. So we got, what are the other props? Other big ones that you might want to hit? I think those are the big few. So
yeah, those are the
roofs,
big ones.
Our doors, studs, we threw that in there. And then burn buildings, and I just got to reiterate none of these are wrong. It's not, don't go out there and buy a different door just because we're talking about this. We're just opening a discussion. We're encouraging people to discuss this stuff. All right. Rules are changing a little bit. All right. Nothing we can do about that. Consult your local congressman, I guess, but you got to start getting creative. Think of the outcome. It's all about customer service. And then when things go awry while performing that customer service, how can we help ourselves in the moment? And if we don't get enough reps in there, that's what it really comes down to. We have to do more work in the training environment than we are doing on the street. We're not getting a lot of fires anymore. We've also been saying that for 20 years.
Right.
Oh, fires aren't what they used to be. I don't know. Maybe what's that in reference to? The 80s?
Yeah, that's
the late 90s.
Yeah.
What is it? I wasn't around for that. I mean, I was born in the late 80s, but I wasn't. It wasn't my time. I didn't even consider being a fireman, even in the 90s and early 2000s. It was.
Right, I was looking at when my old man was, in his heyday of volunteer here. This department was doing like 50 structure, and who knows what the structure fires were back then, but they also had a lot of barns back then. before it got developed, but they were doing like 50 structure fires a year, you know. But you're talking at home response. There was no career staff, so a small little cabinet cooker probably turned into a decent kitchen fire by the time guys got to the firehouse, got on the rig, responded, and everything else. But now we're doing what, maybe 12 a year. So it's
12 good ones.
12 good ones a year. And that's
you get
a
the
good
little
year.
can jobs and stuff here and there.
That's a good year. But I will say the best training prop that you have is the one that you own.
Yes. Yep.
The best burn building is the one that the one that you get to use. The best door out there is the one that's in your firehouse. And you can make them better with a little bit of imagination and firehouse ingenuity, and make sure you go through the proper channels and just don't do any modifications without making sure it's kosher.
Unless the chief authorizes you to use that welder.
Right.
That he doesn't know he's going to buy us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. We just got to get out there. We got to get creative, and we got to hit more and more reps. I understand that there are departments that just, it's not built in their time. You talked about on the last podcast, it's the captive audience. Is it a 10-hour shift, 14-hour, 24, 48, or is it 2-hour a week? In that 2 hours, how can we maximize? And by maximize, I don't mean spend every moment on it. I mean, I guess a correct term would be optimize. What is the goal? And we got to make sure ahead of time that the outcome of whatever we achieve that night does not disrupt the next stage or does not disrupt the actual fire scenario. And like I was just talking about the burn room with that one company, it's not a fear. I just know that seeing that performance over and over again, going to that burn room, what happens when you pull up to an actual structure fire? Okay, you're still waiting minutes, could be up to 20 minutes for the next engine, next rig or whatever. And you don't know where that burn room is. Now, how are you going to act? Because you're used to going up the stairs, making a left, whatever, 2 doors down, that's the burn room. Well, maybe that's not it. Maybe there's 4 rooms up there. Maybe there's 10 rooms up there. Maybe there's 3 floors. And going through that overview, that Gary Klein's RPD, really quick, let's hit on that. I just want to reiterate, kind of brush back on this. So don't think I stated it at the beginning, but he's a research psychologist famous for pioneering in the field of naturalistic decision-making. One of the best bits that's said about him is that experienced people, this is about his RPD model. Experienced people will generally be able to come up with a quicker decision because the situation may match a prototypical situation they have encountered before. Novices, lacking this experience, must cycle through different possibilities and tend to use the first course of action that they believe will work. The inexperienced also have the tendencies of using trial and error through their imagination. Sum that up, all it's saying is that if you don't get out there and play with multiple scenarios and keep this stuff fresh in your mind or keep running through fresh scenarios, he's got the same burn building, it's got the same burn room. If you don't find different ways to attack that burn room or throw small little obstacles, the one night we used a cone and a freaking flashlight, and it was enough to throw you off balance. That's good. That's what we want to see. When people come out and these guys were actually excited, they're like, "Oh, damn it!" Try not to swear here, but they came out and it was just a little thing that threw them off. It was exciting for them. They thought it was cool. It was a parking cone and a flashlight. After 10, 12 years of doing the same thing over and over again, that was fresh enough that it adjusted their behavior. That's what we want to do to ourselves. We want to help adjust our own behavior so that we know, those cards that come up, those slides match an experience. When I'm looking at it, I'm pulling up a card. Yep, I'm literally looking at the building and I'm holding up a card. I'm like, that looks nothing like this one. Well, now what do I do?
Yep.
Well, now I'm just going to trial and error it. And I'm literally just going to keep trying different things. What if should we put gasoline on it? No, that's not going to work. Should we diesel? Nah, that's not going to work. What if we get a fan out? And we keep playing with it. You're delaying patient care or you're delaying customer service, whatever it is. In the end, we have to become more efficient, but effective. So speed, but with efficiency.
Big fan of them. Jocko, just go default aggressive. They'll win.
Just kick the door down.
Yeah.
2.5 every time. Can't go wrong, Well, it was the 3 a.m. knee pain, but that's all we've been practicing.
Well, we've been going for what? Almost 2.5 hours
I think a little over 2 hours, yeah.
Yeah.
So don't get used to your props.
Yeah.
Find ways to navigate with your current props and make it more challenging, make it more exciting. Challenge each other, especially in your own crews, or if you got the same 10 guys that always show up on the Monday night, Wednesday night drills. Man, just hit that door, 3 weeks in a row, 10 minutes before drill. Go, okay, and then you throw the different padlock on. Okay, you throw a chain in there. Yeah, it sounds goofy. Who's got a chain on the door? Well, maybe not in some neighborhoods, but it's enough to just keep it fresh, keep it challenging. So you're not used to the same thing. The pine, the pine lock, because nobody's got a pine lock. They got pine door. Locks are different.
That and master the basics.
Master the basics. I don't know why we even call them the basics. There's nothing basic about it. It's the first thing we learn, so we call it the basics. But there's a reason that's the first thing that we show you, because it's effective. So with that, we'll see you on the next one. Hopefully, I believe we have a special guest coming on.
Yeah,
we look forward to that.
He's locked down. Yeah.
Yeah. So this will be exciting. All right. Other than that, everybody stay safe out there.
Thanks, guys.